Good evening. We'll get this meeting started. Members of the public are encouraged to participate by one, accessing the webcast at www.cityofclovis.com/agendas, two, providing written comments at the same website, or participating by phone or coming to the City Council meeting in person. I'll call this meeting to order, and the flag salute will be led by Council Member Moana. Could
you please join me in Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, call the roll, please.
Councilmember Ashbeck?
Here.
Councilmember Bessinger?
Here.
Councilmember Montoya?
Here.
Councilmember Whalen?
Here.
And Mayor Flores.
And I'm here. Our first order of business is presentations and proclamation. The first presentation is a presentation of proclamation honoring Bill Smithcamp for being named the 2021 Agriculturalist of the Year by the Fresno Chamber of Commerce, and that proclamation will be read by Mayor Pro Tem Ashbeck.
Oh.
Family just arrived, so come on in.
Grandpa's getting an award. You all can come in, the kids can sit down here, you can all sit down here. Grandpa, you're taking them all out for dinner when we're done.
The kids can just sit on the floor.
Yeah, sit on the floor down here. Good job. Do you know how much work it is for the Smithcamp family to go anywhere? Holy shamoly. Oh, look at this.
This is good.
That is awesome. Okay. So, well, that was partly part of the fun. Hello, family down there. So, this is a proclamation honoring Wawona Frozen Foods and Bill Smithcamp as the 2021 Agriculturalist of the Year. And Mr. Smithcamp, we know that this award is going to be formally presented to you on Wednesday night by the Fresno County Chamber, but we actually claim you as our own in Clovis. So we wanted a head start on the celebration. So that is how this whole thing came to be. It was like, no, he belongs to us specifically. We'll share him on Wednesday, but really, so Clovis is Clovis partly because of the Smithcamp family, so we really wanted to take this chance. So thank you for coming, and to the family who I can't see, but I know they're right down there. All of you, thank you for coming too. So let me read this to you.
This isn't a spoiler for Wednesday night?
No.
Oh, okay.
And look at that, it's an awesome photo. Is that before your birthday or after? Okay, good. That was the younger Bill Smithcamp. So, whereas, I'm just going to say Bill, because it's your name all the way through, and it's so long. Whereas Bill Smithcamp's success as president and CEO of Wawona Foods is one of multiple reasons why he has been recognized as the 2021 Agriculturalist of the Year by the Fresno Chamber of Commerce. And whereas under Bill's leadership, Wawona Foods has grown to become the largest processor of frozen peaches in the U.S., processing over 65 million pounds of peaches, along with 20 million pounds of strawberries and other fruits. And whereas Bill is also among the most active community leaders in Fresno and Clovis, he has served on several local boards, including the California Health Sciences University Board of Trustees, Board of Governors of Fresno State, Central Valley Community Bank Board, Garfield Water District Board, and the Board of Trustees for Valley Children's Healthcare, where he served as board chair. And whereas Bill demonstrates a tradition of giving back to the community, he donates to several local nonprofits that serve multiple community needs, ranging from child health care to education. On an annual basis, the Smithcamp family, that's them down there, provides student scholarships for the Smithcamp Family Honors College. Bill also created a campaign to fundraise for Valley Children's Hospital, in which he encourages Wawona Foods employees to give what they can. Every dollar donated is matched by Wawona Foods and matched again by the Smithcamp family. Whereas Fresno County Farm Bureau CEO Ryan Jacobson said, Bill has always just been a phone call away for anything I or the Farm Bureau has ever needed. He is a community steward whose name is synonymous with local agriculture having proclaimed Clovis as the peach capital of the world. Awesome. Now, therefore be it resolved that the Clovis City Council does proclaim Clovis as the peach capital of the world in honor of the contributions of Bill Schmidtkamp and Wawona Frozen Foods as the 2021 Agriculturalist of the Year, and that is signed by our mayor. You want to give him a
Well, thank you, Lynn and Mayor and all council members, audience and my family, and I now know why all the blue coats are here, because my grandchildren are here, and they'll be in good order tonight, I believe. But I am honored, humbly honored. Clovis is first. Clovis is a way of life. I think I was the youngest Chamber of Commerce president back in 1978 or 79, when I didn't know anything, when I just married my bride there. I was the Clovis representative for the Clovis Committee of the Fresno Farm Bureau. I remember when Johnny Weldon and Poncho used to deliver 500 blocks of ice out to our packing house, because that was how we cooled peaches, with blocks of ice. There wasn't refrigeration back then. That was almost before my time. But it was very important, and I was born and raised in Clovis on a peach farm that never stopped producing. And we're really blessed that today, that piece of property that I was born on will continue as the Well Community Church and giving back to the community. I think that is ingrained in what we've all been raised as. And I hope that I have ingrained in my children those same values of giving back, to be a spokesperson for our industry. It does fry me when I do fly through Georgia and at the Atlanta airport, and they are the peach state. And so Clovis, as we travel around the world with some of our friends, they say Fresno is the center of the universe. Really, Clovis is the center of the universe. We have so much going here, and I'm proud to be a member of this community. And I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for this great honor, and I appreciate it. And I'm going to be Clovis all the way. So thank you very much.
Yes, of course.
Bill, before you go, we have a belated birthday gift.
We have just a little something that could help you in when you fly across Georgia. I'm sure it'll fit in your suitcase. So never let it be said that we are not the peach capital of the world.
That is fabulous.
That's going to put it down here, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's great. Great. Get around, man. Get out here, man. My bride of 45 years has put up with me.
To give her the sign.
And there's still more.
But wait, there's more.
This is going on Clovis Avenue.
For you.
That's from Mom.
Yeah.
She's sewing. Oh, yes,
Yeah.
honey. I need a dartboard.
Put over your fireplace. We don't know.
And next is a presentation proclamation honoring the Buchanan 8 soldiers from Buchanan High School who were killed in action between 2004 and 2010, serving our country, and to support the 17th annual Hubbard Barrow Memorial Golf Fundraiser on Veterans Day, November 11th, 2021. And that proclamation will be read by Councilmember Bessinger.
It is my honor and privilege to present this proclamation tonight as a veteran, as a co-worker of Jeff Hubbard and friend, having known several of these young men personally, watching them grow up, and having the unfortunate honor to preside over their funerals and be heavily involved in them. It was an honor to know these young men and their sacrifice to our nation. Tonight we'll be presenting a proclamation of the City of Clovis honoring the Buchanan 8, whereas Hubbard Barrow Memorial Golf is holding its 17th annual fundraiser in their honor on Veterans Day, November 11th, 2021 at Fort Washington Country Club in Fresno, California. And whereas funds raised are directly donated to our local Fresno Veterans Administration Center, in particular the Rehabilitation Division, and whereas the tournament originally began in 2005 with a very small field of friends in commemoration of Corporal Jeremiah Barrow and Lance Corporal Jared Hubbard, who were killed in action in 2004. However, the brothers of Jared Hubbard immediately joined the Army to honor their brother. The youngest of the boys, Nathan Hubbard, was killed in action in 2007, leaving the oldest brother, Jason, no choice but to return home. And whereas in the years after, 5 more Buchanan graduates were killed. In 2006, Tony Butterfield. In 2007, Nick Eischen and Rowan Walter. And in 2010, Brian Percy and Matthew Abate. And whereas 8 young men from the same high school enlisted in the military and made the ultimate sacrifice, serving our country to become known as the Buchanan 8. And whereas in consideration of the family and the sacrifice, the Hubbard Act was passed in July of 2008, allowing the sole survivor of families to take an honorable discharge and return home with full benefits. And whereas the day of golf and celebration is to show sincere appreciation for the commitment and sacrifices made by our servicemen and women, as well as to further honor and remember the lives of 8 soldiers from our community. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Clovis City Council does support the Hubbard Barrow Memorial Golf 17th Annual Fundraiser and does honor the Buchanan 8. In witness, therefore, signed by our mayor, and the official seal is affixed by our mayor, Jose Flores.
Say a few words.
Yeah, that's good. If, ladies and gentlemen, if we could have a moment of silence in memory of the Buchanan 8. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. You probably couldn't hear me before, right? Austin standing next to me was a fellow classmate with Hubbard and Barrow and Butterfield. And my youngest son was one of their classmates. And it was the two of them along with about a dozen others who got together that very first Veterans Day after Jared and Jeremiah were killed. And they just wanted to do something. You would think 17 years later I would be past all this, but they wanted to do something to remember their friends. And it was never intended to be something that was an ongoing thing. Initially, they just wanted to be together. And they collected some money and weren't quite sure what to do with it. And it wasn't a lot, but it was a start. And they went to Mike and Andy, and I got roped in a little bit. And quite frankly, it's his mother and his wife that does all the work. Everybody chips in, but she heads this up. But the idea of Veterans Hospital became a place to give, and they did it again the next year. And then they said, we think this ought to be something bigger. And 17 years later, $600,000, almost $600,000 has been given to the Veterans Hospital for their new rehab center that they have there. And the intent of this is not really monetary, though we hope some good can come from it, but it's to never, ever forget those fine young men and the fact that they paid a price for the freedom that you and I enjoy. And we never want to take the freedom for granted, and we never want the freedom taken from us either, because too heavy a price was paid. And so we are blessed to be part of a community that produces young men like that care more about giving than they do about taking. And so it is an honor. Thank you for your recognition from the City Council of Clovis. God bless you all.
Can I say something quickly? I was in New Jersey when it was announced that Jared and Jeremiah had died, and it was on the front page of the New York Times. And I had friends from New Jersey calling me as I was in New Jersey saying, did you know these young men? I didn't know Jeremiah, but I knew Jared. And I was, again, back east when Tony Butterfield died. And Tony and my youngest son, my son dated his sister. And we got the phone call, a friend called Christopher to tell him that Tony had died, and he was devastated. And I happened to be at the Veterans Administration Hospital doing a presentation when I found out about Nathan. And this has been a difficult situation for Clovis, and I'm proud of the way we stepped in and put our arms around these families and honored these young men, because every service member, when they raise their hand and swear an oath to protect and defend, know that this is the potential price that we all have to pay. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We now have public comments. This is the opportunity for the members of the public to address the City Council on any matter within the City Council's jurisdiction that is not listed on the agenda. In order for everyone to be heard, please limit your comments to 5 minutes or less, or 10 minutes per topic. Anyone wishing to be placed on the agenda for a specific topic should contact the City Manager's office and submit correspondence at least 10 days before the desired date of appearance. Anyone here, the chambers, wanting to speak on any item not on the agenda? Anyone on the web?
No.
Okay, and then we have some correspondence that we could read. Next, ordinance and resolution. Sure.
So, Ms. Taylor, may I introduce you to Shauna Wave. So Ms. Taylor spoke to me in advance about an item. I don't think you needed to speak on public, but she wanted some help, and I think Shauna is the one that can help you with that. So can I just link you to during public comment that way? Thank you. Thanks, Ms. Taylor.
Okay. Next item, ordinance and resolutions. With respect to the approval of resolutions and ordinances, the reading of the title shall be deemed a motion to waive a reading of the complete resolution or ordinance, and unless there's a request by a council member that the resolution or ordinance be read in full, further reading of the resolution or ordinance shall be deemed waived by unanimous consent of the council. Consent calendar. Items considered routine in nature are to be placed upon the consent calendar. They will all be considered and voted upon in one vote as one item unless the council member requests individual consideration. A council member's vote in favor of the consent calendar is considered and recorded as a separate affirmative vote in favor of each action listed. Motions in favor of adoption of the consent calendar are deemed to include a motion to waive the reading of an ordinance or resolution of the consent calendar. For adoption of ordinances, only those that have received a unanimous vote upon introduction are considered consent items. Does any council member wish to pull any of the consent items, consent calendar items? Nope. Anyone in the public wishing to pull an item from the consent calendar? Not here in the gallery, here in the chamber, I'm sorry. How about the web?
No.
Okay, so bring it back to council. What is your pleasure?
I'll move for approval, and I will note that item 8 was, on the dais,
Yes, was added.
added, yeah.
Second.
We have a motion to second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion, and those voting no? Oh, it's okay. So it's unanimous 5-0 for approval. Administrative items. Administrative items are matters on the regular city council agenda other than the public hearings. Item 9, workshop. Consider update from the Clovis City Police Department on the state of the department, and the presenter will be our Chief of Police, Kurt Fleming.
Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Thank you for having me here this evening to give you an update on the state of the police department. Before I get started, I just want to personally thank each of the members of council and the city manager for the last 2 years being so supportive of the police department. It's been an extremely difficult 2 years, just I think for our community, let alone for law enforcement, the professional law enforcement, and knowing that you guys had our back during that time has really meant a lot to myself as a leader of our department, and for I can speak for the officers on the street. It's really meant a lot, and putting on the boots every day and hitting the streets, knowing that our council is supportive of us. So thank you. Also in preparation tonight, I want to thank all the department heads and staff for assisting us with providing some of the data and some of the information you're going to see tonight. Specifically, I wanted to personally thank a couple individuals, Callie Biaggi, one of our crime analysts who provided a lot of information to me. Corey, my admin assistant, Taylor, with one of our department staff analysts, senior IT analyst, Pania, Tim Friesmeyer, who's the staffing study consultant that put together that large document that you have that is single space and very difficult to read. And lastly, my command staff and all the officers that make up the department. This is not a one-man show. Everything you're going to see tonight is us together presenting this information to you to give you an update of where we're at right now. So the Clovis Police Department is a special place. I worked a different department, worked with other agencies. This is a unique place that we work with or work for. It's a unique community. I think kind of like Bill Smitkamp just spoke about, Clovis is a way of life, and it truly is. Our department it's a proactive department. We like to go out and try to prevent crimes before they happen instead of just responding to crimes. We're innovative, trend-setting. We take care of the small things, and we like to think that we solve problems when we go out there to calls on the first time. And we like to think that we are a full-service department. But what I'm going to show you tonight, it's making it more and more challenging to meet our mission, to meet our goals. It's becoming more difficult with the resources we have, and I just felt obligated to come and speak before you and kind of let you guys know, and as well as the community, kind of where we stand today. So tonight, just a brief overview of what I'm going to cover is we had a staffing study that was conducted back in 2006 under then Chief Jim Zulum. We used that same company in 2021 and just completed that most recent staffing study this month, and that's what you have, that 50-page document there. I'm also going to look at the budget just briefly over the past 15 years, kind of some of the challenges that we face with our budget, and then impacts on staffing levels and what those impacts have had on the community as well as our department. And then I'm going to tell you just quite honestly what we need today to be where we should be, and what we'll need over the next 5 years to be what I think to provide the service levels that we need for our department and our city. So I'm going to start back in 2006, and really this presentation is going to cover the last 15 years. So Chief Zulum at that time started a staffing study, and he wanted to look, what do we need for our community here in Clovis? It's not just 1.3 per capita or 1.6 of our neighbors next door in Fresno. What do we need here in Clovis? So he thought outside the box, and at the time, this was a nationally recognized model on doing data analysis of departments to find out what resources each department needs. And so he undertook the services of Etco Solutions and Tim Friesmeyer, and they did about a year-long study on the department. And I know Councilmember Bessinger, I think, was a sergeant at that time, and it was a long process. And I'm not going to go through all of what happened back then, but the ultimate study provided the results that the department, the patrol division, this study only looked at the patrol division, was understaffed and needed about 18 additional officers at that time. At the time, the city council, I wasn't here, I just started in 2006, so I was just trying to get familiar with the department at that time. But I know Councilmember Flores, Mayor Flores was on the council at that time, Councilmember Ashback and Councilmember Whalen were all on the council at that time, and firsthand saw that presentation. And my understanding is council agreed with what was presented at that time and made some policy decisions that additional funds were dedicated to the department, because at that time the department grew up to 119 budgeted positions, and we got up to 117 shortly after I got here. But we all know that the bubble burst and the market crashed in 2008, and from that point on is kind of the results of today of where we've come to where we're at today. So why I chose to do the same study 15 years later, I thought it was a valuable study back then. It would be a valuable study today to have the same company come back 15 years later and look at our department. Just to kind of explain why this data-driven study I think is probably the most valuable in determining staffing models. There's really 5 other ways departments have historically did it, and I'll just talk about those real briefly. Some departments look at crime trends, and crime's growing up. We need to throw some more officers at the police department to get more officers out there to bring crime down. But if you think about that, you're rewarding a department that's probably either maybe they are staffed appropriately but just not doing a good job, and then vice versa, if crime's going down or crime's steady, and you don't give them any additional staffing as the population grows. So you kind of got to look at it: are we rewarding a poorly performing department, or are we punishing the ones that are doing a good job? And I've historically heard as being the chief of Clovis, is you guys are victims of your own success. And I truly believe our department does an amazing job with the resources we have. But we definitely know we can do better, and we definitely want to do better at this point. Another approach is per capita, and that's how many officers per 1,000. I'm going to show you that a little bit later, so to show you where we fall, because it is a good judge of determining how you compare to other agencies. But it's not a one-size-fits-all. Every community has their different challenges. Some are larger than others. some have higher crime rates, so some just need different staffing. So it's not really the best approach, in my opinion. And then minimum staffing levels. What is the minimum amount of officers that you need to staff the street with? To me, that's the wrong approach. We're just responding to calls. We're not being proactive. We're not doing any community-based policing. Those are the things we don't want to do. But I'll tell you, that's where we're at right now. We are bare minimum amount of staffing on our streets, providing the minimal amount that we have. And I'll clearly show you where we're at. Lastly, another one is authorized budget level. It's a financially fiduciary responsibility, and it's probably the best, is we only pay what we can afford. But all crime, depending, if we can only afford so much and crime levels going out of control, we need to figure out something different, to do something different. So I definitely don't agree that that's the best one to take place. So what we did is the work-based model in 2021, and that's the study you have there in front of you. And what this looked at is strictly our patrol division. We wanted to do apples to apples to what they did in 2006. This is based on the PAM model, which is the Police Allocation Manual, which was developed in Northwestern University for their Center for Public Safety and is nationally recognized. So Tim, actually, the consultant, actually was a professor at Northwestern, developed this with other professors, and they have gone on over the last 25 years and done this at multiple police agencies throughout the country. So what we found in our study, Tim came in and got 5 years of CAD data, which is a computer that we used. When a call comes into dispatch, the dispatcher enters it into the computer system. It gets sent to the officer out in the patrol car, and that's considered our CAD system. So he took 5 years of call data, got sent to him, did all the analysis on that. That includes GPS locations, calls, how long we spent on a call, how many officers did it take to handle that call, and crunched all this. I can't sit here and try to analyze and give you all the specifics. As part of the contract, Tim will be more than happy to come in here and explain and answer any questions that you have. So if you have detailed, specific questions of this study, I'll try my best, but Tim would be more than happy to come in. So really, what the study came down to, and if you read through there, you can read the executive and the kind of the finding at the end, but it found that our department is significantly understaffed in the patrol division. Currently, right now, this PAM model looks at a 30-30 split. So out of an officer's day, or out of an hour, how much time does an officer have reactive and how much time is proactive? And they want a 30-minute split. So 30 minutes of proactive time, 30 minutes of reactive time. The study found that our department, our officers, are 42 minutes of their day is consumed with responding to calls, and 18 minutes of time is proactive. So what that breaks down to is we're becoming oversaturated with the calls. We're becoming more of a reactive agency. Once you get to a certain saturation level, Tim finds that officers will go in service and just kind of wait for the next call instead of going out and pulling traffic stops and being proactive and doing those community contacts. So he found that we needed 18 to 22 additional bodies in our patrol division to get to that 30-30 split. And that's not taking into account all the reductions in our investigative unit and all the other things that I'll kind of talk about here shortly. So this is a comparison of 2006 and then 15 years later to today. So our population has increased over 43% in that time period, and our department staffing of sworn officers has decreased by 4% over that last 15-year period of time. If you use the same per capita rating that we were back in 2006, and this is not when we're at 117 sworn, I didn't sneak that in there. I used at 110 what they were in 2006, and the per capita was 1.25 at that time. If you took that per capita rating at that time and brought it out today, we would have 51 additional officers than we do. At that time on patrol, they had dedicated call takers. As part of Tim's study is how many people do you have in patrol that are responding to calls? That's community service officers, K-9 officers, corporals, and our traffic division all responding to calls. And at that time they had 60. Today we have 68. So you might be confused on, Chief, you're telling me you have less officers, how do you have more in patrol? And I'm gonna talk about how that's happened. But we've had to reallocate resources to staff patrol because patrol is the core function of our department. And when you call, we respond and we get there in a hurry. So to compare to 2001 to 2006, I took this directly out of Chief Zulam's master service plan. On one of his pages, he talked about units outside of patrol, and he noted, and I'm going to read this out of his master plan. He said on page 28 of his, which you don't have, but I'm just going to read it. 1974, we had 4 detectives. And in 2005, after 31 years and 327% increase in population, the unit only grew to 8. As you can see up there, they had 8 at the time for investigations. Narcotics 4, gang 4, and so on. This is where we are today. So 47 years later, 510% increase in population, we're still at 8 detectives. Minus 4 in narcotics, minus 8 in our gang unit, minus 3 in youth services, and minus 1 in magic. I will tell you though, the gang and narcotic unit was combined to create our set unit, but there's only 3 officers and a sergeant dedicated to that unit. So that tells you where those bodies have gone to supplement patrol. They're coming out of these specialized units that we use to be proactive in solving crime before it happens instead of being reactive. So additional cuts that have taken place over the last 15 years, these are proactive units on the bottom. Those are the ones they eliminated. They're ones I kind of just covered. These are a lot of proactive programs, preventative programs that we've had to eliminate since then. I'll just kind of read through them. So a little bit like the investigations caseload. Detectives, we only have 8. Our population is expanding. Calls are coming in more. We're starting to have to prioritize what cases we're responding to or taking on and to investigate. It was very rare when I was in detectives that we would ever suspend a case that had leads to follow up on. We routinely suspend cases that have leads to follow up on because we have to prioritize what's the most important, what's the most, largest loss, what's the most violent crime, and those are the things we're working. And a lot of other cases are going without being investigated fully. Our SAFER program was a domestic violence program that we identified victims of domestic violence, reached out to them, and brought them into a kind of a counseling session and resource gathering to connect them. Today, we're really relying on other agencies like Marjorie Mason and not doing that so much in-house. We used to have somebody on the FBI task force. We no longer have that. And a lot of these in the middle here, transient, municipal code enforcement, bar details, a lot of these have been reduced. Juvenile operations, a lot of our juvenile youth services and counseling have been reduced, if not eliminated. PAL and DARE have been completely eliminated. And then the rest there, community watch, community events, community outreach have been reduced here in the last couple of years especially. So this one, I just want to talk a little bit about budget. This is represents the last 15 years of our budget, and I just wanted to state that our budget has consistently grown with the size of the city's budget. Proportionally, as the city's budget grows, ours grows consistently the same. It's not that we're being shorted or you guys aren't dedicating the funding. This is not what I'm saying at all. Proportionally, though, of our budget, these additional costs have increased disproportionately. So our health insurance is now, instead of taking up 5%, which it did 15 years ago, 6% of our budget is now going towards health care. General services has increased by 3% of our budget, and our PERS costs, our retirement costs have gone up an additional 3%. Our salaries, on the other hand, have what monies are dedicated to our salaries have actually decreased by 3%. So if you kind of add all those up, it's about a 10% change in where our money and our budget is going to. And if all that was able to be dedicated towards salaries, it potentially could add another 23 officers to our department. So if we could realize the money that we have currently, we could do a lot more with it. But because of costs that are outside of our control, our budget is going less and less towards personnel. And we're obviously a heavily personnel-driven department, and so it makes it difficult when we're not able to realize that.
You know what, Chief, I need you to repeat
Sure.
that last part. So, you had mentioned if health remained at 5%, general services remained at 7%, and PERS remained at 10%. Did you say you'd have the ability to fund 130 officers? Did I hear that correctly?
I was saying that if you add those up, that's 7% right there, along with the 3% on this side of our salaries that had decreased. That's 10% of our budget that's not going to salaries that used to. And if you took it back further, we went back 25 years, 17% of our salary used to be was dedicated to salaries. To today, it went to so it used to be 57.9% of our budget went to salaries. Today, it's 40% of our overall budget goes towards salaries. So, but that's because of additional increased costs that, like I kind of pointed out here today. There's some other costs, like now we have our own CAD system, Axon body cameras and tasers and all the technology equipment we have. Some of the camera infrastructure that we've increased our budget on over the last couple of years. All that's taken away from the proportion of money that we can put towards salaries, is what I was kind of trying to point out here.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So recently, in the last 2 years, because of resignations, let me find my slide here. Because of retirements, resignations, and some workers' comp injuries that we've kind of experienced here in the last year and a half, we've had to make some additional cuts. So our proactive operations, I'll tell you right now, we're trying to put out juvenile operations. We're having some juvenile issues at Willow Station and some other places with vehicles racing is a big thing that people are calling in and complaining about. We'll put out an overtime operation and page out to see if anybody's interested, and people just aren't answering up anymore. And that is not typical of our department, but because of all the overtime that's been put out to fill patrol spots, people are becoming exhausted, and it's affecting our proactive operations. Our special enforcement team is that team that I talked about. We combined our narcs and game team to 3-in-1. It used to be 4-in-1. But we recently had to take an additional detective off of that unit. Our magic spot is vacated right now. Investigations, we had to take another detective out of there to supplement patrol. Our traffic unit, for a size city of 122,000, we have 2 traffic officers. And one of them, honestly, is a supervisor that's approving reports, is managing grants that we have, is taking care of all the equipment, doing tow impound hearings. Half his day is filled up with administrative duties. So we really have one person out there dedicated to traffic enforcement, which is definitely not the way we want to go. Planning neighborhood services, we have 3 in there. 2 of them are currently supplementing patrol. Half their week is they're coming in halfway through the day, putting on a uniform and going out and supplementing patrol. Because we're short right now. Dispatch supervisor, we used to have a corporal that oversaw that. They're currently out on patrol, and we have a member of command staff overseeing our dispatch center. So succession planning, I put that on there because it makes my job extremely difficult. If I don't have the ability to promote people and get the future leadership of the department ready to go, I'm in a position right now where I can't promote sergeants. I can't promote people into command staff because every time I promote one of those personnel, it's taking a body off the street that can respond to calls. So we're just going short, which is never good when you have less supervisors than you should out there on the streets. I'm a good example of, I went from an officer to the chief of police in 7 years. That's not good succession planning for leadership for the future. Not talking down that I'm not doing a good job, but I'm just saying, it's not really the ideal situation. It makes it difficult. So I just wanted to add that in there. And then the adult compliance team, which is the ACT team, we have 2 positions that are fully grant funded with equipment, insurance costs, workers' comp, everything's tied in there. It's completely paid for. We had to pull both of those bodies because we're that short in staffing patrol. So we're giving up 2 fully funded positions right now that are vacated. So these cuts over the last 15 years, what impacts have they had on our community and our department? And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about in these next few slides. And a lot of this is going to be over the last, taken place over the last 6 months to a year, because I didn't want to put things out or happened a long time ago. So recently downtown we had a double homicide at one of our bars. I don't want to tell you 100%, but I can tell you very confidently that if we were doing the things that we were doing 15 years ago, this would likely have not occurred. We routinely would do bars where we would go down there and do bar checks. This is all alcohol establishments in town. We would do routine walkthroughs, make sure security's properly wearing the stuff they're supposed to and doing all the things they're supposed to. They're shutting down the bars at certain times. I know everybody in here can remember back Clovis Avenue at 1:32 in the morning. If you've been out there, we would have cars out there with the lights on, letting everybody know the party's over, it's time to go home, and sending people, making sure they had taxis and Ubers or whatever to get out of there safely. And we're not doing that today. And I can almost guarantee, I won't guarantee, but I can almost say that I'm confident that this likely would not have happened if we were doing those same things today. So our DARE and PAL programs have been eliminated for, I think, ever since I've been here. I've been a couple of years, I think it was going on, probably 2008. And we're just not doing the engagement in the schools. We're not doing any of the drug education. And it really starts with the youth and doing that education. And we're not doing it. Typically in the past, the corporals were the chiefs of their beats, and they would go out to every elementary school during Red Ribbon Week and talk about drugs and be a part of the school's program. We're not doing it. I went out personally with Lieutenant Monroe, and we hit up a school. I think one of our other officers hit another school, but we're not hitting every school like we have in the past. And all that has an impact. Our overdoses in the last 2 years have increased by 15%. We currently have 3 deaths this year directly related to overdoses. So I just know there's so much more that we can do and we want to do. Domestic violence. We've had a couple here in the last several months, tragedies related to domestic violence. I'm not saying this is something that we can prevent, but it's definitely something we can educate. We can identify when crimes occur at a lower level before it gets to a violent level, and we can get people into a support group, into resources, and put in the effort to try to identify those people. And we're not doing that here today anymore. And then fatal accident, typically our fatal accidents are more than our homicides. Last year we had 5. This year we already have 4. With a traffic unit of 2 traffic officers, and in the city this size, we're not making an impact. We're not out there issuing citations. We have a number of people calling routinely telling us about speeders in different locations throughout the city, and they're doing the best they can. Typically, we like to think everybody's a traffic officer in our department, but when 47 minutes or 42 minutes of your day are tied up with responding to calls, we can't go out and enforce the traffic laws. These are the things that, when I came to Clovis, these are the things that Clovis was different. And I learned the culture of Clovis and grew up. You would never see this in our city. This is taken a couple of months ago in one of our alleyways. And it's not the city of Clovis, and it makes it extremely frustrating. This is behind an apartment complex in our city. This is a homeless encampment that we were working on cleaning up. There's just graffiti is one thing that we stay on top of. We're covering this stuff up immediately, but it's constantly occurring within the city. So how are these impacts affecting us as far as our department versus the community? We have a lot of development going on, and I'm going to talk about a few big developments within our city that are commercial. I'm not saying they're bad by any means, but they're great. They're things that we celebrate as a city council. But I'm just going to tell you the kind of the backside of what we see and the results of how it impacts us. So the hotel industry has probably, I'd say, doubled in the last 10 years in our city. Just in the last 2 years, we've seen an over of a 200% increase in calls for service at our hotels, which is a huge impact on us. We're seeing human trafficking, fraud, disturbances, gun manufacturing, that's happened twice, and a number of vehicle burglaries at these locations. They are great for the city, and they're 95, 98% occupied. We're like one of the second in the nation in occupancy rates. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it is an impact on our resources, and that's all I wanted to point out as far as that goes. The hospital, we are the medical hub, we like to say. University Health Sciences, we got a future VA hospital coming into town. We have a lot of great things going on. But the hospital is in our top 5 calls for service locations. A lot of people come into our city from outside the city, from other departments that are bringing people into our city. And when they get released, then it becomes a problem for us. And this is one of our top locations for calls for service. I love the hospital. We have a great relationship. We meet with their executive board quarterly. I'm not bashing on them. I'm just saying it is an impact on us. Department of Social Services, we truly don't know the impact. It's a huge buildings over there. They haven't all been occupied. Our calls for service are increasing currently. We're monitoring that, but as that fully gets built out and filled, we'll kind of see how that plays out. But I just wanted to point, this is another one that we're watching and to see how the impacts go as it gets filled up. So retention.
Chief, I was just going to
Yes,
add
ma'am.
to I think the hospital comment, the other thing I think it's worth noting is of those calls to the hospital, I would bet the number of mental health related calls have increased, and those are harder, longer stays for police officers, so it's sort of a volume and a plus length of the call, and I think that's been really hard on, I know Clovis PD, but in every police department. So I wanted to, it's more complicated than just calls for service. Somebody broke into a car, they got mad at their family, but I think those mental health calls have been a huge challenge for hospitals, for police departments. So I just wanted to point that out about the calls that you're getting from hospitals are not all, disturbances or those kinds of things.
Yeah, typically when we go, we end up, some officers will spend hours and hours there stuck at the hospital. So yeah, it's a huge impact. Retention, this one's should be a red flag. It's a red flag for me. It should be a red flag for everybody. We have never had an issue with retention at our department. Just this year, we've had 11% of our department has resigned or retired. Over half of that 11% is resignations, people going to other lines of work, other departments, not just leaving the profession or our department necessarily not to go to law enforcement. About half of them have been resignations to other agencies. And that is not, Clovis PD, that is not what we've experienced in the past. That number truly would be 13%. I had a couple of additional officers that were going to retire this year that I had them stay on. I kind of coaxed them into staying on and put them into a different position to help us recruit and hire additional officers in the department until they can kind of fill their replacements, and then they can go on and retire. But the number is staggering to have 13% of our department retire in a year. And a lot of this is directly related to, you could say, the professional law enforcement, the hits we've taken the last couple of years. But I also think it has, because we're so focused on supporting patrol and the overtime that's coming out related to patrol, there's limited opportunities for officers to do other things at our department. It's patrol, and the few special units, they're dwindling as the years go on. And so if you have aspirations of doing other things in your law enforcement career, maybe people are starting to see maybe Clovis isn't where I need to be. And so that's definitely a concern for me and a concern for our department. Another big concern for me is 26% of our department will be of retirement age in the next 5 years. Currently, 10% is of retirement age. So over the next 5 years, that's a quarter of the department I'm going to have to potentially replace. This year alone, we have hired 14, so we are doing good. And I think if given the opportunity, we could hire, we can find the people. We've been working hard and doing that. So I just wanted to show you as a comparison. Earlier I said per capita is not the best judge, but this definitely tells you where we are. So this is a comparison of 64 cities, and so we are the 4. So comparing us to 63 other cities that are over 100,000 in population, and we're number 62. So Elk Grove and Irvine are lower than us per capita. So that's how many officers per 1,000 in population. I did do a survey of just Valley Chiefs, just kind of want to see no matter what the population was. So from Madera to Visalia to see, and we're dead last in that ranking as well. And could be a city of 10,000, be a city of Visalia 100 and something thousand. It didn't matter, but per capita rating, we were at the lowest in the valley. So if nothing changes, and we continue down the path we're on, these are kind of things that we're looking at potentially cutting. I guess I missed the spot. I wanted to cover something to talk about this, but Tim in his study on a page, I had it written down, but I'm off my notes here. Pointed out there's really three things to have a proactive department. You either have to reduce the calls of service you're going to, reduce the time you spend on calls, or you need to increase your staffing. So we, over the last 15 years, have reallocated our staffing and reduced the calls that we're going to and reduced the time we're spending on. And so these are some of the things we're looking at going forward. Our alarm responses and animal calls are some of our top 2 calls that we respond to. And some other cities throughout the state have gone to an alarm response that will come out a couple times, and then we're not coming anymore unless you get home and your house has been broken into. We'll respond. Or if it's a panic alarm in your home and you're calling for help, obviously we're going to respond. But there's a lot of departments throughout the state that they've gone after this because it's such a high call volume that we respond to. Animal complaints is another quality of life issue that we might need to start cutting back on the response on. Our youth diversion is kind of our last part of our youth services that was cut out that we still have, potentially could be cut going forward. And then our non-injury traffic collisions, that's something we cut in 2008 when the market crashed. We stopped going to those non-injury accidents, and the public was not happy. So we started going back to them, but that's something that we're considering because it's a huge call volume. Planning neighborhood services maybe is reducing that unit down to 1 more and just having 2 dedicated to that. Exploring online reporting, we really don't know if that's a benefit or if it helps in reducing the call volume. And then retail theft, a lot of our calls going to some of the larger retailers in town take up a lot of our time. Is if it's more of a civil issue, they can identify the person as maybe we don't respond to those calls. So those are things we're considering. It's not saying that we're going to do those, but as we go down this path, these are things that we need to consider. And then our traffic unit, we're down to 2. Potentially in the future is just eliminating the unit altogether and putting those two bodies into patrol. I know they're not going to like that if they're here, especially. So what we need, I'll just put it out there. We need 32 officers, and that's today. And 16 of those officers would go to patrol, and 16 of those officers would go to staff and make whole those other positions in the department that have been kind of vacated to supplement patrol. The 8 CSOs, community service officers, 4 of them would go to patrol, 3 would go to a municipal enforcement unit. So we have a CDBG funded position, grant funded. So we'd add 1 more or 3 additional. So we'd have 4 that are strictly focused on quality of life issues, municipal enforcement in our city to get things back to where they need to be. And then the last one we'd like to put into investigations to help out with that side of the house. So over the next 5 years, as our city continues to grow at I think a 2.5% growth rate over the last 5 years, if we kind of estimate that out, it puts us about 138,000 in population. We're going to need another 18 officers to grow as the city grows. So we're really looking at 50 officers, those 8 CSOs, and then as the department grows, we would need additional dispatchers, and a couple animal control officers that are on there. So, how much does this cost is a big question, and, so just breaking out, this is strictly for these staff positions. It's $9.2 million just in staffing costs for the positions. That doesn't include equipment, clerical staff, administrative staff, or this is strictly for those bodies to be put on the street and back into investigations.
I'm presuming that's an annual figure, is that right?
After 5 years, it would be annual at that point, yes. It would ramp up until that 5th year, and then every year it's going to be an additional 9.2 to the budget.
I guess I need to understand a little more clearly. So it's, in order to get to 50 more officers, we need how much money over the next 5 years?
So it's 9.2 annually. But what I'm saying is we're not going to hire, we need to likely hire 15 officers a year for the next 15 years to get to that.
Okay.
So the cost is going to increase over those 5-year period of time, but the final number after the 5 years is going to be 9.2 annually to fund those additional positions.
So, but you're not saying that $9.2 million gets us 15 officers per year, are you?
No, not
Okay.
at all.
Okay.
I'm saying 50 officers, 8 CSOs, 5 dispatchers, and 2 animal control officers. That 9.2 will pay for their salaries.
Okay.
But we're not going to have them all day one, is what I'm saying. So if you gave it to me today and said you can hire those 50 officers, it's going to take me 5 years to hire those 50 officers. So we would increase the budget over a 5-year period of time to get to that 9.2 additional funding.
All right. I'm going to wait for the rest of your presentation because I'm still not clear on that, but maybe it's clarified.
No, I'm pretty much done, so. So I was just going to close with, Clovis is a way of life, and I think Bill coming in here and listening to Smith Camp, I was in another room, and he talked about Clovis is definitely a way of life, and it's a unique department, a unique city, a unique community. I definitely know that the city council understands the importance of public safety and the effects that it has on the community. I just wanted to come tonight as the chief, tell you where we're at, where we've come. We've never recovered from the economic downturn over the last 15 years. I want the community to know where we're at, and I really want to have a discussion on what's the best path forward. I'm obviously going to work with whatever I'm given, but I'm just going to let you know that there's a result of based on what I'm given, of what services I can provide. So I just want to turn it over to the council. I'm available for any questions, and hoping we can have a discussion about where you guys think we should be or where we should head. Thank you.
Questions for the chief? Juan?
Chief, I appreciate your presentation. I think it was a more thorough analysis of what is going on in the department. So this report really only talks about patrol then?
Correct.
And it only justifies the need within patrol. And then your presentation is of the department. So the 50 includes the 18 to 22 plus all the others, correct? Is that how I should understand this report in relation to what you just presented?
Correct. So that report strictly is focused on patrol.
Okay.
We want to do exactly what they did in 2006. What I was trying to cover in tonight's presentation is to tell you that over the last 15 years, because we have not grown as a department, we've actually shrunk, is we have reallocated our non-patrol officers, our detectives, our youth services division, all these other resources, and supplemented them into patrol to keep up with the increased calls, the increased population, and make sure we're meeting our goals and our response times. And that's how we've done that. So what I'm asking for is what the study's recommending, 18 to 22 for patrol, but I'm also recommending that we restaff everything that we've eliminated over the last 15 years in our detective units and the things that have not grown over the last, investigations, like I pointed out, in 50 years, it's only doubled from 4 to 8. And in almost 50 years, it's like 47 years, I think is what I said.
And do you think those other positions, other than just being very pragmatic and going, we need it, is there also studies that, because this is pretty detailed,
Mm-hmm.
It talks about hours on, hours off, what they're putting in to dispatch to calculate everything. Those other units, we don't need that, right? We need it because, hey, we need to take care of narcotics, we need to take care of identity theft, we need to take care of domestic. Is that just, how do you get those other numbers? Because this is good because it tells me exactly based on, I guess, science, data, this is a number. And so those other ones, will we do another study, or is this just getting us back to the minimum?
Yeah, well, this is my recommendation. This is where we were in 2006. If I told you, let's get back to 2006, I could fill in those numbers, but we need to be beyond that in our investigative side of the house as well. This is strictly patrol. Tim Friesmeyer with Edco Solutions does do a full department study where they'll look at your investigation unit, your record staff, dispatch, and he can calculate all that out, but that's going to take probably a 2-year study. And I really felt that we needed to, I wanted to do apples to apples, 15 years, and show you where we're at today compared to then. But that's something we can explore, but I think the situation is so dire that I wanted to get in front of you today to say this is where we're at. I'm good with further exploring and having the data show what we need in those other units. But I think just based on experience and what we see on a day-to-day basis is I'm just giving you my recommendation of what we should put in those units.
So the other units, what you're recommending is just to be back at 2006 levels?
Not necessarily. So in 2006, just for example, our investigation unit was at 8 detectives and a supervisor. We currently have 7 and a supervisor, and a couple of those, or at least one of them, is a long-term light duty. So we really have 6 and 1. I would love to get back to 8 and 1, but I think with the growth from, when Jim Zolan was talking about 30 years ago to today the population has grown 500%. I think that investigative unit should be more like 12 and 1 is where we should really be at, and that's what I'm recommending. I'm also recommending that our gang and narcotics unit that we combine into a set unit that is at 3 and 1. In reality, should be closer to 8 or 10 and 1. And to take on, they could go to hotels in our city every night of the week and do human trafficking operations, and would be busy. I mean, extremely busy. And we're not able to do those things. We're doing them when we have the availability. We'll go out and do a surprise operation. But there's so much work out there that we're not doing. It's because the unit doesn't have the bodies to do it, and that's why I'm recommending that we have additional CSOs dedicated strictly to community enforcement, going out and making sure these alleyways and these things that you're seeing in these photos are not occurring, they're being addressed.
So your 50 recommendation will make it where that reactive versus sort of proactive will be at that percentage point. Well, where it's good.
As of today, we need 32 is what we need today.
Okay, so will the 32 make it where those numbers whatever those studies are, will make it where our officers are not just reacting, but they can actually be proactive?
Correct. So Tim is recommending that we have 18 to 22 bodies, 90 total as report takers in patrol. That's 20 additional bodies. The other 12 that I'm recommending would be to build up our investigative unit, all those other units that we have taken out. If we strictly went based on his study, then, we need additional 18 to 22 bodies is what he's recommended for patrol.
Okay.
But that doesn't do anything to all the other units that support patrol.
I appreciate what you presented as in what we have given up, meaning that the consequences to the community because of the reduction of our officers being in these units, with regards to the bar checks, traffic crimes, domestic violence, drug and youth programs, just the quality of life. And I think that is a very sort of a big Clovis question in which, do we want this? And if we do, Clovis, will we provide you what we are needed, or are we willing to let these go? No more traffic unit, right? I mean, no more bar checks, no more of these. And for you to say that, we could have prevented some of these things, and if not, educated the public and our youth to be even better citizens. I just want us to be able to get you to where you can say, this is optimal, not just baseline, but optimal, where we can provide those other services that have been lost. So that way, the men and women who are serving under you are not burnt out, are not, you know, you can't even help. Because if with only 2 traffic, I drive every day and I see, you know, how people have no fear of being stopped because, you know, our officers, you can see an officer there, but they are probably on another call, so they can't stop anything. And so, with the study, my only issue with the study is, and it could be because of how they did it, is with those tables on page 11, and it shows events going down, right? And it also shows the reactive hours going down. So in other words, it paints a picture in which there's not many events, and you're not spending a lot of hours, officers, in doing these things. Yet, the reality is there are. And if there were explanations as to why, I think that'd be very helpful, meaning we probably didn't know how to input all the CAD information. So that's why it seems like, you know, it's gone down. Because I look at the 2020 numbers, I was expecting those to be higher because of COVID. Everyone's home, they're calling all of you more, yet it's lower than 2019, and the projection for 2021 is even lower than that. And so it makes it where, you know, someone who is opposed to supporting us, or not us, meaning supporting the increase is going to, well, the numbers don't show that you need anything. You know, it doesn't show in the hours as well. So how do you provide more justification and or explanation for those, so that way, you know, the numbers, I don't know if it's them who, the ethical, who needs to help explain that to us, because to me that was a big, you know, something that really stuck out for me.
Yeah, and it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
As time goes on, population increases, calls should go up, right? It makes sense. But 2020 was kind of an anomaly. We had, I know, two months where we were telling officers not to do anything, to go park in their car, don't contact anybody, don't do anything. The public wasn't calling. We had a month where it was like virtually no calls, and that had a big impact on 2020. It doesn't explain the prior years. My concern is when I look at that is it Clovis as a community changing because of the people that are moving here from outside the area? Are they not used to, when you call the police, somebody will actually respond? Are people just not calling us anymore? That's my biggest concern when I see that, because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
When the population increases, we're seeing more and more violent crime out there. We're seeing more and more things happen at some of our hotels in town. It doesn't make sense. But is it because our officers aren't being as proactive and going out and making those traffic stops that include to build up those numbers, and they're just responding to the calls that are coming in? I question that myself. I'm concerned if it's the citizens that aren't calling. That has a huge impact on how successful we are. Yeah. If people aren't calling us and pointing out when crimes are occurring, our success rate's gonna dive for sure.
Don, can I ask a question? Chief, would the Go Clovis app, would that actually reduce a number of calls for service? If I see a municipal code thing, instead of calling, I do go through the Go Clovis app, would that potentially be one of the reasons for reductions? Or does that show as a call anyway?
No, it won't. It goes through, it depends on what city it goes to. And then if it comes to our department, if we create a call based on that. I use it all the time to report things throughout the city. We try to encourage that for other citizens to do as well. But if it comes into our department, we actually go out and take some enforcement action. It should generate an event at that point. But there's a number of things. Over the years, our dispatchers are like a call diversion unit. There's many calls that come in through our dispatch or communication center that they end up handling themselves and never create a call. It's because our dispatchers are so well educated. on a lot of information. They'll end up directing people to other locations versus our officers have to take a telephonic or respond to a call. They'll end up handling that and clearing the call and they never create a CAT event in the system.
Would it also be helpful we have a more electronically connected citizenry who we could refer them to a website or something that we have that would actually reduce that call for service? Go to this website that'll answer your question, or any, because it doesn't, to Vong's point, it doesn't make sense for us to go up in population but actually have reduced calls for service. But I think that the technology may be a part of that, and I think I think I have to agree that some people are like, why am I going to call them that speeding car? They're not going to have time to deal with it. So I think your point is well taken.
And Chief, is the number of hours spent on the calls, is it just because they are also just less people out in the field? Is that also a factor?
The time on the call that we're spending?
Yeah, because those numbers aren't, it shows a decrease as well.
And that was part of my point earlier, is we have to decrease the calls we go to, decrease the times that we spend on calls, or increase our staffing. So we're not spending as much time on calls doing problem solving. We're being more reactive, clearing the call, making sure, you know, if a crime has occurred or everybody's sent on their way or the disturbance is done, and then we're clearing the call and moving on to the next one and becoming more reactive and less problem solving. So the longer you spend on calls, typically is, we want to go to a location once is our goal, solve the problem the first time, and if we have to spend a couple hours on that call, then we'll do that to make sure. That's been the culture, that's been the philosophy since I got here, but it's changing, and that's, I guess, my urgency to come and talk to you tonight, to say that our culture, the way we handle calls, the type of service we provide is changing. And I think we're really at a crossroads, and we need to make a decision on which direction we're going to go, because some of the stuff I put up there, I'm not trying to say, well, we're going to take all these things away, but we're seriously, we're looking at a company that does the alarm services to evaluate, is that something that we need to do here? And it's a potential, something we're looking at currently right now.
And I think one recommendation maybe for planning and also for you is, you know, the 500 Club comes in and then we put an extra fee because of the potential calls for service, and yet these other big, you know, units come in, we don't put anything in, nothing anticipating. So I think that's something in which, in the recommendations that we get in those planning documents, I think that's something in which we can discuss internally, where if this development that's coming in may require more calls for service because of our past experience. That's generally something we're happy to do it to this employer, but these that are really, really generating it, they're getting scot-free, and it's all falling upon you. With the scheduling recommendations that were presented, is there can you comment on which are you leaning towards one? Because there was that 12-hour pitman, the 1040, the modified, and the optimized, or is that just something you're not even looking at, or is that something, you know, you're leaning towards one of them?
We definitely find there's some value in the efficiency. In our current study, there's some modifications we can make to become at least, I think it's 10 or 12% more efficient. The pitman schedule is obviously the best for efficiency, but it's not the best for our department. It doesn't take into account the team aspect. It has no training built into it at all. So we would have to either train on overtime. Currently we train, we have Thursday's our overlap day where everybody's working, and that's usually our training days. The pitman schedule doesn't have that built into it at all. It really, your days off are changing every week. So for family, for kids and single families and people that have to juggle going to school and all the things that we believe here are, believe education is important. It would make things like that very difficult. And it's not really thinking about the family aspect of the officer. So I think that one's less doable. It's the most efficient, but it's not the best for the health of the department and employees. So I think modifying what we currently have, moving some hours of shifts around, we are definitely going to do that in the future. The problem with right now is if we do it in our graveyard shifts, it's putting it down to like 5 to 6 officers in the middle of the night. For a city of the size of 122,000, it's an officer safety issue. It's a one bad call, and we're going to have nobody left to respond to calls. So it's not something we want to do right now, but it's definitely something we are going to do in the future. I really like his the beat structure. It really brings some balance to the workload for everybody. I would like to implement all 12 of them and staff those with a body, but that's not realistic. But I like his aspect of going to 12. You deploy the first 8 equally throughout the beats, and then take the remaining officers and kind of split them as proactive units. So there's definitely some things that we're going to explore with that. The shift schedule, we are going to make some modifications, but not going fully to that Pittman schedule.
Okay. And I guess my final comment is then I'm assuming our Police Officers Association is heavily involved in analyzing this report and making recommendations to you as well, so that way it's sort of a top-down, everyone's on board together in one voice.
Yeah, before we make any changes, they will definitely be involved in that. This report was just completed last week, and I wanted to get it to you guys prior to this meeting. Jordan, who's our president of our CPOA, has a copy of it, but we haven't sat down and analyzed it. He actually, it's a small world. When Tim Friesmeyer, the consultant that did the study, came down and met with us last time, he was going to eat at one of our local restaurants, was in there, and lo and behold, runs into Jordan, sees him in uniform, so they start talking, and he says, "Hey, I'm doing your staffing study, and I'm here to talk to your department tomorrow." And he goes, "Well, I'm the president of the association." So they sit down and have lunch together, and got to talk a lot about the study and the results of it. So Jordan probably has just as much knowledge about the study as I do.
Yeah. So I saw that they took a lot of time speaking to people on the front lines to really get a full analysis of it. Well, I am the council member who picks out little mistakes. I have to put one, bring one up. So. They wrote us as a charter city, and we're not.
Saw that same one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I just want to make sure that that's clear, because it's a big difference in how we can help.
You guys are inseparable.
Lawyers unite.
I appreciate you guys reading every word. That's good.
I didn't read that word.
Then,
Well, I think, so I didn't read that word. I don't do that, as well. I think the only question that matters to me is what kind of place we want to live in. And I think I've said this for 5 years, if not longer. We are out of runway. And I think about police like I do hospital ER. So hospital EDs are really good at just doing whatever comes to the door, because that's what they do. And people come and they just do it, and no one knows that they're on the verge of collapse. And PDs are like that too. And I'm not saying you're on the verge of collapse, but I'm saying you just do what comes to you. And your job is just to keep doing more and more and more. And so I am grateful that you came here. I do feel responsible that I've sat here for all these years and I guess sort of said what I could, but we've allowed this to occur to you. And I guess I'm feeling responsible right this minute. So sorry about that. But I'm glad that you came, and I'm glad that you said it the way you said it. And I think, of course, there's more analysis on how many beats, and is the 9.2, does it include PERS, and does it include health, and all of that, yes. And what can we do today, and what's a 5-year plan, how do we get there? All that I think we need to do, but to me, the only question that our citizens need to answer, we'll answer it for the 5 of us, but is what kind of place we want to live. And I don't think it is this place. As you paint out this scenario, I just don't think that's it. And so I've been an advocate since 2009. We've got to find a different way to get revenue to the police department, whether it is charging different occupancy tax for hotels or, hospitals, some way that hospitals could help, or a retail, or so, I don't know, but I think the funding model for police today is not the model that we had in 1976. It just is not. So I mean, to me, I think we gotta get some people in a room and tell us what kind of place you wanna live. And then we did that before and let people weigh in on what matters to them. We're just 5 voices, but to me, I would gather a group of citizens and I would give them your presentation and I would ask them, what kind of place do you wanna live and what are you willing to pay for it? And how are you willing to pay for it? And then see what we can do. Because we just cannot keep asking you to do more with less. You have 64 officers, fully trained. 64 officers in a city that's 120-some thousand. That's
in patrol, I'll clarify.
60, well,
Yeah.
but in patrol, that's we're talking about. That's an unacceptable number. So, I'm not gonna sit here anymore and go, yes, come back next year, we'll have a plan. Like, I think we're done with that. I'm done with that. So, as one council member, I would raise the red flag and say, let's raise it, let's gather some citizens, let's figure it out, let's see what city staff management can do. Let's put a plan in place to get you where you need to be. Because people move here because they're safe. We are kidding ourselves if it's any other reason. And if we can't support that, I think the city that we'll see in 100,000 more people is not where we want to live right now. And I don't want to be part of any more of this sort of decline in the support you had. Your performance is amazing. Like an ED, you just keep doing what comes to you, but you are now saying, we're kind of out of runway. And I, as one council member, I don't want to be out of runway anymore, because it's going to take you, couldn't find 50 officers today if you had to, and it's going to take you some time. So I just think this is a really good call to action for the council, and from a policy perspective, the runway is done, and we don't have any more runway, and we need to figure that out. And if we got to gather 30 people in a room, citizens to weigh in on what's important to them, let them decide. And if that's the kind of place they want to live, that picture, that's one thing to know. And if it's not, then I think we could figure out an action plan. But I'm kind of out of runway myself right now. So thank you for bringing it to us. Thank you for being clear. Yes, we need more analysis, but we're out of runway anymore. And I think we've got to act. For me, it would be irresponsible not to do something to change this trajectory.
Thank you. Chief, I just want to start by thanking you for the presentation. Appreciate you spending time, I think, maybe with all of us individually as well, in anticipation of tonight's presentation. One of my favorite documents in the city of Clovis is the CAFR, because that allows us to kind of get a real long-term view of where monies have been spent over a significant period of time. And so to kind of Lynn's point, we, in the city of Clovis, want to be the safest city in the valley. We've been able to be the safest city in the valley. But I think that what you presented us with is we are about ready to either drop from either being the safest city in the valley or certainly not meeting the standards that we have kind of placed upon you. So the way that we, at a policy level, generally how it is that we assist those who we direct to do certain things is, through our management of the budget. And we try not to get into, department heads' departments or how they handle their budget, but we kind of say, okay, well, we know that this is a need, so let's make sure that we fund it. So the CAFR that I have here in front of me only goes back to 2011. And you've touched upon some of these issues, and it, hopefully will be clear where some of my frustration lies. And maybe yours as well, I don't know. In 2011, we funded public safety $33 million, $33,331,000. In 2020, that was brought up to $59,876,000. So that's an 80% increase for public safety. And I understand that public safety is both police and fire. So then I went to, okay, well, what about the positions that we have in public safety? And for that 80% increase in funds, what we got was 27% more full-time city employees within the police department. It went from 146 in 2011 to 179 in 2020. And just so we're clear, fire went from 66.5 to 67 in 2020. So fire didn't have, they had really no significant increase in personnel, but there was a 27% increase in full-time city employees, for, the police department. So the citizens of the city of Clovis are throwing, I think, a significant amount of money towards public safety. And we're seeing, an increase year over year in how much is being, sent to public safety. And so that's why I was particularly interested in the, what you had brought up related to general services and CalPERS. So I don't know if we can go back to that slide, Carrie. But there's something going on there that seemed, at least from my perspective, that seems to be unclear. If citizens of the city of Clovis are putting 80% more into the police department over the last 10 years, why is it that all of this money is not giving us, enough employees to staff the city of Clovis? So I don't know what the figure is in general services that, between 7% to 10%. Can you give me an idea of what that number is?
It'd be roughly 3% of $40 million.
Okay. And then so I presume then that we're going to have the same thing with a 3% for the PERS as well?
Correct.
Okay. So let me get my calculator. Oh, because when I do it in my head, my lawyer brain comes out and it doesn't work. So that's just $2.4 million. So that's not going to be enough for that other figure that we started to talk about, which was the 9 million figure.
No, the point I was trying to make, Carrie, if you can click back on that. And maybe I didn't do a good job conveying it, but I was just trying to show that, I was trying to give credit to the council of, you have dedicated, the focus is public safety and growing us. We haven't grown less every year. It's been very consistent. As the city budget grows, the percentage is proportionally, we're identical to the city's growth. But the accounts within our budget have disproportionately grown outside the favor of going towards salary, towards people. Health costs, general services, and PERS are some of the biggest consumers of those increased costs that are taking away from money that I can put towards putting people into patrol cars on the street. And this is really what I was trying to point out. Like I told you before, if I went back 25 years, we're trying to stay in a 15-year window, but just 25 years ago, 58%, 57.9% of our budget went towards salaries. And today it's 40% of our budget. So that's almost 18% reduction over a 25-year period of time that is going of our budget proportionally to salaries. So it's just something to point out to say that our budget is growing, but it's not necessarily going towards being able to realize sworn positions in our department.
Well, now we're kind of getting closer to that $9 million figure then. 14% of $40 million is $7.2 million.
Yeah.
So I think that's where at least I want to be focusing my attention, at least initially, is how is it that money that used to go to salaries is not going there at the rate it used to, because it's not general services and it doesn't appear to be CalPERS, though CalPERS is something we can't control. Health insurance isn't really something we can control that well. I thought general services might be an area that we can control, but I think for me, if we can just get you another $7.2 million by figuring out how to get 57, your salaries at 57% of your budget, then that's a pretty good start. And so I don't know how to do that, but I think it's worth us investing some time in to figure out how we can get you up to that percentage. Again, it sounds like we're gonna, I don't know. I really don't know how to do it. Do you have an initial thoughts on how we can get you guys back up to 57% of your budget?
No, that's why I'm here. I don't know. I was a criminology major and not a financial. I think it's, some serious decisions. If we're going to stay within our current budget, the city budget, there's some serious, prioritization that needs to occur, or I can't control PERS, I can't control general services. All these things are outside of my control.
Right. Well, your council can control general services. We can't control PERS and we can't control health very much. So anyway, I guess what I'd like to know is what is it gonna take in order to get you to 57%? And it doesn't sound like you have the answer to that
No.
today, and I wouldn't expect you to. But, boy, if we can get there, that's an extra 7.2 million. And I know you can't hire $7.2 million worth of patrol officers tomorrow, but if we can start going in that direction over the next 5 years or so, I think that's gonna be a big help. And meanwhile, we can hopefully, improve our community, in the sense that, you know, we'll have more sales tax revenue, maybe increased property values, that is gonna make up that additional, you know, $2 or $3 million in the next 5 years for you. So those are just some thoughts. But I do appreciate the effort that you put into it. It was not, nobody up here is interpreting this as a knee-jerk reaction of, you know, on one side you have defund the police, and the other you have, you know, give the police more money. I think that your approach has been, I think, very valuable and insightful, and I thank you for your presentation. So thank you. Those are some thoughts.
Sure. I'll have some comments during council comments, but you talked about 11% of your workforce has left. What percentage of your workforce is currently on light duty or disability?
I'd have to,
You can give me a round figure. I mean.
yeah, well, patrol itself, it's changed because we've gotten some people back in the last couple of weeks, but it was up to like 17% of our patrol staff was out at light duty at one point. And that really impacted our ability to, that's when a lot of those things I pointed out in the last couple of years, when we had our next patrol sign up, instead of, you know, constantly filling shifts with overtime, we brought all those people out of those special units and put them into patrol. Problem is right now, and I look at my phone daily, we're paging out for, you know, one position on every shift for an entire week. And that just can't be sustainable. We're starting to order people in, our people aren't stepping up because they're exhausted. And that can only go on so long. And that's why I wanted to point out the retention slide is, you know, people after a certain point are gonna look to go somewhere else where the workload is not the same, or just to retire early. I've had a couple people retire prior to 50, just not take their retirement and go look for a different line of work. So it's not just you know, the profession as a whole, it has to do with the quality of work and life and enjoying what you do every day. And when that starts to get impacted by, you know, getting ordered in when you're supposed to be going to dinner with your wife, and all of a sudden now I'm at work, it has an effect on your home life as well.
So we're losing people, either to retirement or to other avenues of adventure. We have a fairly consistent, well, I think in most police departments, you have a fairly high disability percentage of people off just because of the nature of the work, backs, knees, shoulders, things like that. So that stresses our patrol staffing. There have been a plethora of laws that have come out of Sacramento for training and recruitment and other things. For mandated training, how has that affected, or has it yet to affect our mandatory training? And are we training on overtime? And are we backfilling those positions with overtime so that people can go to the training that politicians in Sacramento have decided we need as a profession?
It's definitely impacting our ability to, when you worked here, is creative, innovative training, doing things that we wanted to train in-house to make our employees better. And now we're having to do what's mandated training just to get it done, and not being on the cutting edge of things that we want to do that are important to our community, and training our officers to be top-notch. And it's becoming more mundane training that's required that we have to do. Our schedule has a training day built into it, so we're not having to train on overtime. We train while we work, and one month, one shift's covered, and the other shift while they work the streets, and the other ones are training. And so that's how we get around not having to create, the overtime issues. But if we want to do that cutting edge training, do some things that are outside, we're having to do those on overtime. We recently, in the last couple of years, have switched over all of our patrol rifles to a different firearm, and all that had to be done on overtime. There's some other training things that we're gonna do in the future that are, instead of going outside and sending people to outside schools, we're gonna have our in-house investigators train on certain things, and we're gonna do that in-house on a weekend and have people come in on overtime to do that, because we don't have the time to send people to outside schools to get that training. So we're gonna do it in-house with our experts in the field and have them train our people.
And to your point of having to order people in, that definitely has a real adverse morale effect. I mean, we hire good people who answer the phone when it rings.
Yeah.
The problem is you're going to have people who are going to look and go, if I answer this phone call, my wife's going to be mad at me, like to your point, and you can only whip a mule so long before the mule just stops going. And I don't want to ever be in that position. Thank you.
First of all, Chief, thank you, one, for the report. Thanks for your leadership here and your executive staff, and to all the officers here in Clovis. The work you do here in Clovis is exemplary, and it's evident here today because of what we know of your work, the experience we've had with it, and that includes all the professional staff that supports those that are out in the patrol cars. Because without the professional staff and the officers out on the street, the work doesn't get done. I know it because I've been in the profession now for almost 40 years. And we appreciate it. The five of us appreciate it. We hear what you're saying. I understand that as a profession, we're going through some pretty negative times in general. There's not a department that doesn't have some of the malaise that you've described tonight. I hear it from chiefs up and down the state. And it is sometimes because of our state, the uniqueness of our state and its laws. And some of the people that are less appreciative of the work we do. But I'm also convinced that the great majority of the people we serve still appreciate the work we do and want us to be here and want us to do the work that has to be done, because the number one job of government is public safety. That's paramount. Public safety is first. The finance of government, though, it gets tougher. You've acknowledged that we've kept up as far as funding you as much as we fund the rest of the city, and we just have to get a little bit more creative somehow, and sharpen our pencils in finding ways to find alternatives for funding, because that's all it is. It's about how we're going to fund the level of service that we want, and go back and have a conversation, as Lynn says, with our community. We have become accustomed to a level of service, and is that the level of service we still want? And if it is, we got to pay for it. And I want it. That's why I've lived here all my life, and that's why I make Clovis my home. And I know that's why many people seek Clovis as the place of business, a place of recreation, and where they call home. So, again, thanks for the report. Thank you for what you do. And we got to find new sources of revenue or find new ways to get to the level before we sink, because it is true that if we let it go below the level we want, it'll cascade into something we don't want Clovis to ever become. And once, it's just like roads. I'm reminded of the roads. If you don't take care of your roads, all of a sudden you're having to replace the whole road. So you got to put that slurry seal. So you guys, we're looking for the slurry seal.
Seal us
so-
up, please.
No, you guys won't be the slurry seal.
No.
We'll find that, the extra funding to put that extra layer of protection, the officers that you need to, and the professional staff, the CSOs to give that layer of protection, because, but on the malaise, on that negative portion that we're dealing with in law enforcement, you know, just stay positive. This is, the pendulum will swing, and I see it swinging back the other way. I think the majority of our people love law enforcement, so just keep doing the work you do. You are appreciated, especially in the city. And I know in the whole state, believe it or not, even California loves you. So.
Well, thank you all for giving me this opportunity tonight, and I thank you for all your comments, and again, I appreciate every one of you in your support over the past, well, the time I've been here since 2006, you guys have been very supportive, so thank you.
So is there well, we're going to do public comment?
I am.
Yeah, sorry. I was out of something to say, but I'll wait till you're done.
At this point, I'll open up to public comment. Anyone in the audience here in Chambers wishing to comment on this item? Anyone on the web?
No.
Okay.
I just wonder, as an action item, that I think there's a couple of options up here. So I guess for me, I would say this seems urgent today. Not today, but the short-term forecast is urgent around public safety. So what I would suggest is that you work with the city manager. You can choose one. You have two over there. Just kidding. And then maybe we keep our focus on this for the next couple of months as a council. We look at it every month, or I'm not sure, but I feel like it's kind of a pyramid. So I think Bob's discussion about how do you reallocate that percent? How do you get back to 57%? So what is in our existing budget, what's available that we could reallocate? And then I think there's sort of a middle category, maybe kind of the additional funding things and the occupancy tax and whatever that might be. And then this won't surprise my colleagues, it's kind of annoying, but I really would advocate that we gather some citizens in a room to talk about what you just said. Because this was a shocking story for the city of Clovis, in my view. This is not the Clovis story. Glad we told it, but I think this will get people's attention. So I would advocate for some kind of a convening of citizens in some fashion to talk about this. We've done that before. People have really good insight, and their lived experience with all of you is different than ours. So I really think that's a little bit longer-term solution, and then I think we can see what's out there in terms of additional revenue as required. I do not think we're going to get to 52 more officers saving money in our current budget. I just don't think that's a possibility, but I think we could get there in kind of a three-step plan. So that would be my advice, that we stay on this. Otherwise, I don't want to not talk about this in next July. We're like, well, we're down to 62 officers of patrol, and I think we can't do that anymore. So that would be my
Direction.
advice, yeah, my direction. My request that we stay on this and
Sure.
come back with a plan.
You know, when I worked for the police department, I took great pride in saying that I worked in the safest city in the valley, and I still take pride in that, but I know that we're at a point where we have to do something, and we can't do it with our current financing. We have to find a different way. I agree with Len, we need to get our citizenry involved, because I think that if they truly understood just how close we are to having some big issues, that they would step up. There's an old saying that for the want of a nail, the horse lost the shoe, you lost the horse, you lost the rider, you lost the war. Looking at some of our domestic violence murders, could they have been prevented? Because they don't start with a murder, they start with a violation of a court order. And if we don't deal with that effectively, then the person becomes emboldened to act even more violently. I have citizens say to me, I called the police about people racing down Clovis Avenue and they didn't do anything. Or you drive down an intersection and you see multiple burnouts in almost every major intersection. These are the nails that we're losing, and we're going to lose the battle. And we won't know we've lost it until we're engulfed in combat in a very bad situation. And people will say, how did we get there? And it'll be through inaction. So we need to get our citizenry involved, and we need to find a way to pay for these services, because we can't do it in our current financial structure. I've had people demand that we defund the police department. And I told one person that I'll do that when I draw the last breath from my lungs. Thank you.
Well, I think we are enjoying how great Clovis is, and we forget it because of how safe it is. And I said it at our joint meeting. New families come because of Clovis Unified, because they want their kids to go to the best schools. But they stay because it is the safest city. They stay because they can go to our parks, and go to our trails, and go to our shopping centers, because they feel like nothing's going to happen to them. And if we lose, or if we ever lower that, then we have lost whatever Clovis is. All the other things combined. So we have to maintain that no matter what. And our job is to present that, and to fight, and to make decisions that will always keep the citizens safe. And so I encourage us to be able to support this position, intellectually. So in other words, we need to study, okay, this city this size, how many people should we have in drug unit? How many people should we have in a internet crime unit? So that way it's really solid and it's defensible. So that way an intellectual person go, okay, in a city of 100-something thousand, you do need that. That does happen, and that is how much it's going to cost. And so that way it's very, very clear. And then on the city side, we have to do what Bob says and look internally, where is it? And if it isn't there, okay, now it's time to go, where will we get that? Is it in a revenue, generating someplace else? And I'm a firm believer in that people will pay for what they want. Okay, call it a tax, call it a fee. But if they want it, they will pay for it. And so that's where I believe that the citizens of Clovis, if they want what you are providing, they will pay for it. They will vote to support it. But if they don't want it, like Lynn said, we get a group of citizens and say, no, we don't mind the dirty alleys, we don't mind the graffiti. Yeah, just take care of murder and rape. That's good enough. Okay. Then it's time for us to really decide what we want as a city. But I believe we need to put that forward, and I'm willing to stand behind that, as a father and as a citizen of Clovis, not just as a council person. And so, Chief, I think your presentation is what needs to be presented with this as backup, like you did. Your presentation is something in which, a lay person will go, that is the clear story. That is what is before us. And I am in agreement with Lynn. It's yesterday we needed to act. And so we need to act now, and this has to be at the forefront of our discussion moving forward. Because if we don't, I say it also in planning, if we don't, these things take so long that we're going to be behind. And when we're behind, it's hard to catch up, and it's going to be lost. And so it's going to take even more resources to get back to just what we have today. So, thanks.
Thanks. So, if I was in charge, I guess I would want to have more staffing at the investigation level, more time allocated to police reports, because that helps what it is that I do, for a living, right? And everybody available like that to come to court to testify. But, you know, I'm not in charge. And, you know, we kind of provide direction, to, the police department. And, there have been some decisions that have been made from 2006, it sounds like, to, today, that has reduced the salaries that were 57% of the budget down to, I guess it sounds like you said it was 58%, down to 40% of the budget. And I don't know why those decisions were made. Maybe they were made for the right reason. But I do think that if we're, you know, if we're going to have a citizens gathering of some kind, I think it's pretty easy to have everybody say, yeah, we want to be the safest city in the valley and want to give law enforcement as much as they need. But then when they hear, you know, that we've increased the public safety budget by 80%, and we've also had 27% increase in full-time city employees for public safety, then they're going to wonder, okay, well, wait a second, you know, how is it that we've put so much money into public safety that it's still not getting us where we need to be? And I mean, to bring up a really sore subject with me, that's kind of what happened last time we had this conversation many years ago. And we didn't do our homework, and it was pretty easy to communicate to the citizens of the city of Clovis that it wasn't a good idea to raise taxes. In fact, 2/3 of the citizens voted against the sales tax increase, and it created a very difficult tension for me, because I was the only person who was opposed to the sales tax increase. It felt like, at least it was up here on the city council, and I had a bunch of my friends who work for the city of Clovis who didn't like my position on that. But if we don't actually continue to approach this from an intellectually honest perspective, we're going to go down a road that's going to just be miserable for a lot of us. And so I think that we need to, you know, first take those steps to decide why it is that we're throwing all this money into public safety and we're not getting what it is that, you know, we sort of expected, which was an 80%, you know, reduce it by inflation, but an 80% increase in services. Why is that happening? And then maybe we can go to the citizens of the city of Clovis and say, this is why. Now, here are our options. So I appreciate all of the thoughts up here from my colleagues on the council, as well as the chief.
And I agree with what Bob is saying, that we do have to do the math. And once we do the math, I think, and we analyze this question more, we'll be in a better position to have a more intelligent discussion, because I still believe in that broken window theory. It really does work. And I don't want to see broken windows in Clovis. And I think it is starting to happen. And if we don't start paying attention to those little misdemeanors, when you said ignoring retail or not going to retail calls, that's the broken window right there. Because I know in California, you can go into a Target and take $950 worth of merchandise, and nothing happens to you for the most part. But something should happen to you in Clovis. So we can't let something like that start here in our city, because it will spiral out of control. And so let's study it. Let's do it. Make it empirical, using the calculus that the gentleman you guys hired uses, and then so we can present it, because to everyone, because I believe that when we start thinking about, do we care about our people? I think our citizens are loyal and to you as their protectors. They know what it takes to protect. They're protectors too, and they're willing to pay you, the professionals, to do the job. I think we have a better city, a more safer city, because they too contribute to that safety. And if it's, you know, it might be a few more dollars somewhere, that they're willing to contribute if we do the calculus right. So, that my direction for staff is let's get a committee, a task force together of citizens that we as council members bring together to study this question and make sure our finance people are deeply involved to understand the issue, why even though we have funded the police department, some numbers don't seem to add up.
We can start looking at some of that internally, you know, just the different spending patterns. We do have on our draft agenda for next week this very question. We have a request from a member of the public that we do appoint a citizens committee. So next week we'll have a workshop on that item. We wanted to get this report in front of council first, give you some time to digest it. When we come back next week for that workshop, we'll be looking for details. How many people, how are they going to be appointed, and how will we do the analysis? Do we do do we wait till we answer the question as to what's changed in the spending patterns before we appoint the committee? Is that part of the committee's role? We'll address all of that in next week's workshop.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. No, he's moved already. He's the captain. He's the captain.
And Lieutenant Monroe, while you're walking out the door, yes, that's me talking to you. Best wishes in Grover Beach. We appreciate your service in the city of Clovis. We are better because you were here. So thank you, and we will miss you, and we'll be moving over there someday to visit you. Yeah. Stay safe.
We'll move on to item 11, consider approval, authorized submitting the California Water and Wastewater Arrearage Payment Program application. Staff will be Jeff Blanks, Deputy Finance Director, Paula Mendares, Assistant Public Utilities Director. There they are.
Can you all hear me? Yep, okay. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. My name is Jeff Blanks. I'm the Deputy Finance Director. With me is Paul Armendariz, who's the Assistant Public Utilities Director. The item before you is to authorize submitting the California Water and Wastewater Arrearage Payment Program application. I just have a handful of slides here to give a little bit of background on the program, what it is, kind of how we got here, and what we're doing moving forward. So a little bit of background. So the governor signed an executive order back on April of 2020 that suspended all water utilities from shutting off water due to non-payment. That executive order was extended recently to December 31st. Since that time, the city has seen a rise in delinquent balances for its utilities. So we're looking at approximately 3,500 accounts, about 1.8 million in total debt across all utility services. Now, specifically the water amount, which is what we're talking about tonight, is approximately 710,000. So the state received and allocated approximately 985 million in federal funding to respond to this across the state. They established this program from that funding. In September of 2021, various utilities were asked to provide survey information about their delinquencies, which we did. And since then, and after establishing the program, they opened up an application process, which needs to be completed by December 6th. Utilities must now apply for an allocation based on outstanding residential and commercial water service balances. Again, the program is only for water at this time. The state will be revisiting this in early 2022 to determine if there are residual funds, and if so, they may revisit that to look at wastewater. So, Staff internally researched delinquent balances, identified water amounts for the period March 4th, 2020 through June 15th, 2021. That's the eligibility period for this program. Our application will include accounts and delinquent balances. The State Water Resource Control Board, which is overseeing this, along with the Department of Finance, will review it and determine our eligibility. Once the city receives the funds, they must apply credits to customer accounts within 60 days, as well as notify the customers of the credit. Staff will also be confirming that the accounts still have outstanding balances before applying the credit, as payments continue to come in from customers. Staff are also researching any 1099 effects for credits over $600. The state's been somewhat silent on that, pretty much leaving utilities to figure it out kind of on their own. So our recommendation this evening is to authorize the submission of this application. Again, applications must be submitted no later than December 6th. So from here, with authorization, we would be finalizing that application, finalizing all figures associated, and submitting it to the state. And with that, Paul and I are here to answer any questions that you may have.
Question for Jeff?
I have a question.
Ben?
Jeff, does this, we still try to collect the debt? This just provides the revenue to offset the loss from the debt, but I assume we still try to collect the debt from the resident?
This would actually be a credit and would offset their debt, so we wouldn't collect the service charges that this is covering, but we would have to, obviously, we'd be collecting the rest of the services, as they would have balances that also include refuse, sewer, and some of the other services that we provide.
Okay, thanks.
I see no more questions. So the forgiveness of the
Yes, for those balances that exist within that time period, it would be forgiven.
what we get reimbursed would be forgiven.
Exactly. That is correct.
Okay, I'll open it to the public. Anyone wishing to comment on this item? Okay, I'll bring it back to council. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion authorizing submitting the California Water and Wastewater Arrearage Payment Program application.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. So the motion carries 5-0.
And congratulations, Paul, on your wife's new job. Oh, nice presentation on your part, and on your wife's new job. You're welcome. Tell her that you figured it out, you've got it worked out, just do what you do.
Okay, public hearings. A public hearing is an open consideration within a regular or special meeting of the City Council for which special notice has been given and may be required. When a public hearing is continued, notice of the adjourned item is required as per Government Code 54955.1. And item 12 is consider items associated with approximately 1.6 acres of property located along the east side of Osmond Avenue and the west side of Barron Avenue, north of 2nd Street, TGP Investments, LLC, and Flying Line Investments, owners, applicant, Dirk Puschel, representative. We will be considering approval of a resolution, a request to approve the environmental findings of a mitigated negative declaration for general plan amendment GPA 2018-03 and rezone R 2018-09. B, consider approval of a general plan amendment 2018-03, a request to amend the general plan to resonate the median density residential 4.1 to 7.0 dwelling units per acre to the very high density residential 25.1 to 43.0 dwelling units per acre classified for future development. And C, consider introduction of an ordinance, R 2018-9, a request to approve a rezone from the R1 single-family residential to 6,000 square feet to the R4 very high density multiple family residential zone. Staff will be Senior Planner George Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, good evening. Before I get started with my presentation, I would like to just state for the record that the council received correspondence this evening from Michael and Robin DeFalco and it was provided regarding this project. The project in question here encompasses approximately 1.6 acres of land. The project is located on the north side of 2nd Street between Osmond and Barron Avenues. The major cross streets in this area are 3rd Street to the south and Clovis Avenue to the west and Sierra Avenue to the north. The applicant this evening is requesting the council's approval of 2 proposed planning entitlements, one being a general plan amendment to change the land use designation from medium density residential to very high density residential. And the second entitlement is a rezone, requesting approval to rezone the project site from the R1 zone district, which is single family, to the R4 high density multifamily residential. The proposed project is a 40-unit multifamily residential development at a density of 25.1 dwelling units per acre. The project is being proposed as non-gated and will be providing a total of 80 parking stalls, half of which will be covered stalls, which is consistent and in compliance with our development code requirements. Just to provide a brief timeline, this project was brought before the council for the first time for your consideration back in March of 2020, at which time the council directed staff to continue this item, requesting the applicant to prepare a complete traffic study to analyze the potential impacts to the area and including the hypothetical multifamily project, the Benedero project just north of the Landmark Square project currently under construction. The traffic study was completed in February of this year, at which time then the item was brought back to the council again in July of this year, where it was continued again to allow the applicant to continue working with the neighbors with some of their concerns and perhaps modify the project based on some of those comments. And again, the project was brought back to the council in September of this year, where it was continued again to allow the applicant time to update the proposed site plan based on some of the comments expressed by the neighbors. In terms of circulation, the project will be primarily served by Osmond and Barron Avenues, which is Osmond is directly to the west and Barron Avenue is directly to the east of the project site. The project will disperse traffic on both sides of the project site onto the local streets, and it will provide connectivity to 3rd Street to the south and Sierra Avenue, which is located on the north end of the aerial. As part of the project, the applicant will be constructing a part of the off-site sidewalk on the west side of Osmond Avenue, just north of 3rd Street. And it's going to be approximately just under 300 linear feet of sidewalk identified in yellow on the screen that the applicant will be installing with this project if approved by council. In terms of traffic, a traffic assessment was completed by PlaceWorks, which was a consultant initially when the project was brought before the council. The reports indicated that trip generation from this project will be below 100 peak hour trips, therefore concluding that a preparation of a traffic study was not required. However, through the direction of council, the applicant was directed to go back and complete a full traffic study, which analyzed the potential impacts to the area, and like I said again, include also the hypothetical multifamily project on the north side of the Landmark Square project, currently right now being under construction. The traffic analyzed specific intersections, including 7 intersections near the vicinity of the project. The report indicated that the project will generate 218 vehicle trips per day, 19 trips during the morning peak hour and 23 trips during the afternoon peak hour. The project meets the city standard for traffic impacts, and mitigation measures are not required. Per the city's guidelines on vehicles miles traveled, the project screens out of any required thresholds. Therefore, no further analysis will be required. In regards to public outreach, per city policy, the applicant has conducted 2 neighborhood meetings, one prior to the Planning Commission and another prior to the City Council. Both of these meetings were held in early 2020. The concerns raised by neighbors included, but not limited to, change in density, perceived impacts to traffic circulation in schools, access points, and overflow parking. It is important to note that the applicant has conducted additional meetings on site above and beyond what the code requires, with just the last one being last night, Sunday, November 7th. Approximately 10 residents were in attendance along with the project team and city staff. I think it's important to note that the meeting was relatively going well until it got contentious at one point, where words were exchanged between the applicant and some of the residents, that shouldn't have happened. And I'll allow Dirk to speak more on that if the council wishes to do so. However, 2 big things to take away from that meeting last night were that there are still concerns about the 3-story proposed elevations on this project, and also overflow parking onto the local streets, such as Barron and Phillips. Just to provide a quick update on a recap on the updated site plan. If I can do this, here it is. So the updated site plan removed a portion of the building on the north side of the project site, where I'm pointing at, moved it to next to building 2. So therefore, by doing this, it created a greater buffer between the multifamily building and the nearest single-family residential home of approximately just over 140 feet or so separation. Another proposed change was the applicant will be installing enhanced landscaping along the Barron Avenue street frontage, again, to provide a greater buffer between the multifamily and the single-family uses on Barron Avenue. If the council recalls, the original site plan showed a trash enclosure right here in this area, where the garbage truck will actually have to access it through, off of Barron. While with this revised site plan, the applicant went ahead and moved the trash enclosure just a little bit more than 50 feet southwest of the previous location, where now the garbage trucks would need to come in and on site to pick up, the waste. And finally, the applicant will be installing additional landscaping along the southern boundary and the western boundary as well. And staff still recommends that the council this evening approve a mitigated negative declaration for General Plan Amendment 2018-03 and Rezone 1809. Approve GPA 1803, requesting to amend the general plan to redesignate the project site from medium density residential to very high density residential. And finally, to approve Rezone 1809, requesting a rezone from the R1 zone district to the R4 very high density multifamily residential zone district. And that concludes my presentation at this moment, and I'm available for any questions.
Questions for George? Long?
George, with regards to parking, there is no restriction on parking on the streets that enter this new development, right?
Correct.
Okay. But the parking ratios meet our requirements for the number of units.
Correct. All 40 units will be 2-bedroom units, so therefore they require 2 stalls per unit, one covered and the other one open, which the applicant is providing.
Okay. And then, is there something we can do potentially where there's, to help with parking? Is there something we can put more restrictions on street parking? Because sometimes I've seen it in other, sort of in the southeast, where people are parking on the streets, people are parking more than their 2 cars, so because of that, they are overflow onto the public streets. Is there, you know, where there's no overnight or something like that at all?
Like,
Was that ever discussed, or?
and just so I understand correctly, almost like, painting the curb, red in public streets where normally you would be able to park now?
Yeah,
Yeah,
or
okay.
can you put it where there's no overnight parking? You know, I just don't know what we can do
Yeah.
just to help ease some of the concerns. Or is that something where we don't like to do that, just to keep it where it's public?
I'll allow Mike, our city engineer, to address that question.
So we typically haven't restricted parking, especially in neighborhoods. Where there's room for parking, we have typically allowed it. We do have some parking restrictions on semi-trucks and things like that within the city. But beyond that, we haven't done it in the past.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that background. And then, your assessment of last night's meeting, George, overall, were there also supporters there, or was it mostly those who were against sort of the project?
Well, for the record, I was not present
Oh, you
there.
weren't there? Okay.
I wasn't, but I do have a staff member, Ricky, who's our deputy city planner, who was there that evening. If Ricky wants to come up and just
Okay.
provide a brief
I noticed
comment on
there's
that.
been a lot of amenities or changes made, and so I just wanted to make sure that they came and acknowledged those, or were they unsatisfied with what you have proposed?
Yeah, good evening. Yes, I was in attendance yesterday, and, I'll let the applicant or Dirk speak to it more if they want in detail.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would classify anything as, supporters being there per se, but,
Okay.
we were out there for the better part of an hour and a half-ish, 2 hours, to talk about some of the concerns at the site. So like I said, I don't know that there were, supporters of the project, but, there's definitely some concern with the parking, as you just described, along the street, as well as the overall height of the project being 3 stories versus 2. So those were kind of some of the big concerns.
But with moving the trash enclosure, were neighbors still against it being moved there? And then moving part of the building away from that resident?
Yeah, I think that definitely helped with some of the concerns. I think the gentleman who had originally raised the concern about the trash enclosure was there, and as I recall, I think he was satisfied that it was moved on site further away, so it wasn't access off the street. So.
Okay, thanks.
Drew? Could you bring up the Google Earth on this, please? I guess, and I appreciate the work that the developer's done on this to try to mitigate some of this. The problem, as I see it, is this project in combination with whatever goes in to the west of it is going to be a big issue, because if you look at I guess on my map is the Walter C. Smith Company, the construction lot there. When we did our project for the senior center, we would not permit entrance off of Second Street. Looking at this, there's no way to mitigate it to go to First Street, because you'd have to actually go through some of the condos or around them. Plus, you'd have to cross the trail, which is something we have, as a council, have said we don't want to do, because obviously going under or over is prohibitive financially. So we're kind of funneling everything into this neighborhood with this project and potentially what is going to come up next, correct?
Well, certainly, anybody that develops that De Benedetto property would have the ability to find another access point to Clovis Avenue. They could buy out the car wash, they could, exit onto First Street. I think the proximity of Second Street to Third Street and the influence it had at that location was not a good thing, and that's something we didn't want to approve. And I think that the property owner was arguing that there was some right with the agreement it had with the city. But the traffic study that was prepared, as directed by council, included consideration of the traffic that would be added by a 200-unit residential project there, and putting the traffic out onto through the cul-de-sac into the neighborhood to disperse out from there. And it certainly adds traffic, but it didn't add traffic to the point that it became a problem or created queuing issues on the local streets. So that was the conclusion of that.
Did they factor in when the senior center and transit center go in? I mean, I obviously they'd have to speculate what kind of traffic that would generate, but this plus people coming and going to school, buses coming in and out of the transit center, was that factored into this traffic study?
Well, I think the traffic was introduced onto the streets, and I can't remember exactly how it was dispersed, but the senior center library complex provides a second access point for that project through the project down to 3rd Street. So some of the traffic would actually go through that site. Some of it goes out onto the to the local street system, depending on where the traffic is going.
Do we have a map showing how that would look? Because maybe I'm having difficulty. If I'm leaving this apartment complex and I want to get on 168, I'm either going to go north on Phillip to Sierra and then Sierra to Clovis Avenue, or I'm going to come south on Osmond to 3rd Street and then go to Clovis Avenue and either go to Bullard or go. How would I go through the senior center to alleviate? Is that really something someone would do, or is it just an option?
This one. So if you're on this site, you would have an access point into this parking lot right here beside the library, and you would meander through the site to get to that.
And I guess we're talking apples and oranges. I switched up on you here.
Okay.
I'm talking about the proposed development tonight.
Okay.
If I'm leaving that proposed development and I want to go down to 3rd Street, I'm not going to access anything involving the senior center or the train. I mean,
no.
Even after it's developed, it's probably not going to be necessarily. There's not going to be connectivity.
No.
Okay.
I mean, you may be able to get through there, and if your destination was to get to the transit center, maybe you might go in that way, but yeah, otherwise not.
I guess one of my concerns would be, we're talking about no queuing or no excessive queuing, but I would think that 3rd and Clovis Avenue, if people were coming out of this complex, plus the people coming and going out of the senior center, transit center, people coming and going to school, I can't see 3rd and Clovis being anything but a little bit of a gridlock.
There will be heavy congestion in the 20-year scenario that they pointed out. In the near term, things are a little more congested, but it still is at a reasonable level of service.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, so the staff report says that the vehicular traffic will come out 3rd Street on the south, so I'm going to come all the way down Barrett to the 3rd Street, is that right? Am I reading that right? So the 2 points of access for this complex are what? Barron all the way down to 3rd?
There's a driveway there that exits onto Osmond, and then you can go from there to Third Street.
Okay.
There is a driveway, is it right here, George?
Yes.
And you can then take Phillip up to Sierra and go wherever you're going from there.
Or I could come down, I could come out
Or-
and go down Barron if I wanted to do that.
Or you can meander a different way through the neighborhood, however you want to get there.
I had a question on this, on the traffic study. It said there's 40 units in this development, is that right?
Yes.
2 bedrooms per, so call it 2 people, give or take-ish, 2 adults maybe? So how could that, 40 units, 2 adults, only generate 15 trips during the morning rush hour? How could that be? That's only less than half of them go somewhere?
So the way traffic studies are done, it's based on empirical data where people actually go out and survey these kind of projects and get a bunch of data to show how the traffic works. For this type of a multifamily project, it generates a certain amount of trips per unit. So I think the traffic report said that it generated 218
Trips per day.
daily trips.
15 trips during the morning and 18 during the late afternoon.
Is that correct, George, or is that the incorrect number that we identified earlier?
Peak hours. That's 18 a.m. and I believe it was 23.
It just seemed
So-
incredibly low to me.
So the numbers in the staff report, I think, were pulled from the wrong table in the traffic report. The actual numbers are 19 a.m. and 23 p.m. Still not a lot of cars, but that's what we would expect.
Okay, I mean, that doesn't seem practical. I mean, that's only half the people during peak hours, half the units. One person in half of the units goes somewhere
In that time period, yes.
in that time period.
Yeah.
It just seemed low. And so I think part of the concern is the traffic and how, I can't imagine that it wouldn't be more than that. And those streets were not designed for too much traffic. So I think I was trying to reconcile the number on the trips. That doesn't quite make sense to me. Okay, thanks. Thanks.
Bob?
Thank you. So, we often talk about how the state of California prevents the city of Clovis from doing what it is that we would like to do for a variety of reasons, among them affordable housing. This particular project, though, is not part of our RENA overlay, is that right?
Correct.
And that's how come it's in front of us, otherwise it would have been more of a ministerial decision that would be made by the Planning and Development Department. So we can do what we want on this one. Our hands are not tied by the state of California. There may be some advantages, it sounds like, related to trying to provide some infill housing and increase our housing inventory in Old Town Clovis, but there's nothing that is going to get us in trouble with the state of California if we say no to this.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Any more questions? I'll open it to the public. Anyone from the public wishing to make a comment on this item?
Better. I'm still Dirk Puschel, 923 Van Ness in Fresno. Right, I remember. Traffic was one of the concerns that was raised in our conversation with Mr. Pace. And many of the questions that you're raising were raised by him, and they're all legitimate questions, and they were raised again Sunday night at the site. I can tell you that we retained Mr. Peters and Peters Engineering here in Clovis because his firm did the environmental impact report for the city's landmark senior village and transit center immediately to the south. So he had very accurate numbers as to how the intersections in this neighborhood were operating. He also was involved in the De Benedetto property and did a traffic study for them. So he had an understanding of what was considered for that property. As a part of the project team, we have looked at we have had conversations with the DiBenedetto family and Mr. DiBenedetto when he was alive, and we also talked about options, as you may recall, of developing the sites together, where we talked about purchasing that industrial building that's facing kind of north and south to provide additional access. But there's other options. But frankly, the DiBenedetto property and family were not prepared to move forward, so it was somewhat speculative. But we included the DiBenedetto property at the request of the staff, and particularly Councilmember Whalen, and we were happy to do that. But what they did in the traffic study is they studied what traffic engineers call peak periods. So it sounds, initially, how is it possible that 218 total trips could be reduced to this number of 10 or 12 or 18? It's really immaterial if it's 10 or 12 or 18, but I understand your point. But what happens is that between that 2-hour period, from 7 in the morning to 9, which is the AM peak, and then in the evening, which is the 4 to 6, there's a percentage of traffic that's going to be moving. And it's somewhat similar to single-family residential. If single-family residential generates 10 total trips a day, it's about 1 peak trip per home. So it's consistent. But these weren't numbers that we created. These were numbers based on national studies. So I don't really want to get into too much time with that. But he also took the 2040 cumulative. So he added in all of the things that Councilmember Bessinger were concerned about. Well, what happens about growth? What happens to 3rd Street? What happens to Clovis? What happens if there's additional growth on the DiBenedetto property? And all of the 7 intersections that were analyzed, none of the intersections failed as a result of this project and the DiBenedetto property. So we weren't causing the impacts. As a matter of fact, those impacts, as Mike mentioned to you, don't occur for some 20-some-odd years. But these are kind of difficult concepts to explain. We tried to do so that night, Sunday night. And the staff also, I think, has done a good job in their analysis of street capacity. What were the streets really intended to do? And if you think about it, of the 218 trips, there's only 14 new trips that would be associated with the morning, and about the same number in the afternoon. While we were there, and Ricky was at the meeting for the almost 2 hours, there was hardly any traffic that occurred either on Sierra or Osmond or Barron. And we say that because there's very little capacity on the streets that's being used. This is kind of the thing that happened when we were making the presentation Sunday, and that's kind of how the thing kind of disintegrated. And I'm sorry that it did. I don't think it became productive at all. As a matter of fact, it was very unproductive. But we tried to take the site plan based on our conversations with Mr. Pace and say, what can we do to make this a better project? One was the trash enclosure. We tried to move the trash enclosure. We did move the trash enclosure. How can we create a better buffer along Barron? We created a substantially larger buffer along Barron. There's also going to be a block wall at a portion of that property. That provided an opportunity for some tall trees to be planted in that corner, and a continual planting of tall trees along the north end, along the southern base of the ponding basin. We also moved the drive approach to try to focus people moving more south as they exited the site, rather than going up Barron, going through that little curve, and then stop sign, and then ultimately to the west. Again, the traffic study utilized the standards that the city has used on other projects, and we didn't meet VMT by well over half, and we had no impact on any of the 7 intersections in a cumulative sense. So I don't know how much more to add. I don't think it's important to do so. We also had a conversation with the lady to the south, and we're adding a block wall. There's some conversation about a 7-foot wall, 8-foot wall. We never got to the details, but we've committed that there's going to be a block wall along the south end. We've also added, at the request of one of the council members, the sidewalk. There was no credits that were taken for walkability to the site, so we added about 300 and some odd feet of the sidewalk, which we think will create substantial walkability. At the meeting, we had a conversation about parking. We meet the parking standards that are established by the city. We also talked about your parking survey of about a year or so ago, that your city planners and the city police department evaluated different apartments throughout the city and found that your parking standards were adequate. Is there going to be some parking on the streets? Probably. We also said we're going to have an on-site manager. We wanted to develop a relationship. If there's calls, call us. We want to be involved in making sure that our parking for some event, party, I don't know, doesn't annoy the neighbors. But there's parking that's occurring on the streets today, on both streets, on Phillips and Barron. Aesthetics was also important. I already mentioned to you the large trees. We've submitted a comprehensive landscape plan to the staff, particularly on the side edges, along Barron and along the northern end. We wanted to develop large trees, and you can see there's already a grove of trees that some of the single-family homes have. So essentially, somewhere about 140, 150 feet, we have a clear distance from the nearest single-family residence along the eastern property line. And of the single-family homes that are on Barron, there's probably 4 that would look directly onto the site, and they're going to be some 200 feet away. Now, having said that, the height of the structure is 35 feet. It's the same height as a single-family home. Same height as a single-family home. Staff has a picture of the house that I live in Fresno. The house next door to me is 32 feet. Yeah, that's my house is on the left. This is my neighbor immediately to the west of me. That house is 32 feet tall. And I have a 10-foot setback. He has a 10-foot setback. So I'm 20 feet from a home that's almost as tall as the proposed apartments. So there doesn't seem to be a diminution in value in this property. I don't think 150 feet away is going to have a diminution in value of these single-family homes, particularly that most of the homes are oriented in a north-south direction. We also talked about rents. The rents are going to be about $2,400 a month. There'll be 2-bedroom, 2-bath of 1,100 square feet. There'll be no monthly rents, and there's no no leasing per bed. That's very important. We're also talked about disclosures in the lease. That was something that we talked to Mr. Pace about. We also mentioned it to the neighbors last night, that we will prohibit these multiple cars. It's something we can do. It's something we can enforce. We think it's very important. We don't want them taking up the spaces, because if you're going to pay $2,400 a month, you don't want to come home as a nurse or whatever and not have somebody in your space. That's really annoying. We also talked about the open space requirements. We more than enough exceed the open space, and as a matter of fact, this new plan provides additional open space. We also talked about memorializing the project site plan and elevation. So if the council was in mind to approve this project tonight, this is the project that you get. And we provided material boards to your staff and talked to Mr. Pace at greater detail about what the project will be built in terms of quality. And we said it to Mr. Pace, we said it to the neighbors. We're fighting for the top end of the market, not the bottom. There's no interest in doing so. We think we've done a very good job. This is a project that started some time ago. A previous planning director, we had multiple conversations with them about the need for this project. To Mr. Whalen's point, the law has changed so that this project, by definition, is no longer affordable. But in conversations with the Office of Planning and Research that your planning director also participated in, the city does get credits for the multifamily allocation and improvements to your housing allocation. It's not considered affordable because they're not by definition affordable, and I don't want to make a representation to you that they are. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have of me. I think we've done a very good job. We meet the standards that were established by the city. And if you look back at the controversy that was surrounding the project at Ashland Temperance, and there were significantly more people that were concerned, you never hear a complaint about it. I think it's a beautiful project. I think these kinds of projects, if they're done well, and we believe this is going to be done well, they do blend in. People accept them as an infill, as a quality project, and we think that's what's going to happen here. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them of me.
Any questions, Mr. Bush? Bob?
Yeah, sounds like a lot of work, for a project and a lot of frustration, for you. So, it seems to me that, it would have been a lot easier just to keep it the designation that it was in the general plan of medium density, and to keep the zoning as single-family residential. So the effort is continuing to be made for this multifamily development. And so I guess my question is, why do that? Why do you continue to pursue it despite the frustration you've experienced and the fact that at least it appears to be an uphill battle? You've said that you're going to be putting in sidewalks, but that's not apparently enough to make the neighborhood be on board with it. You've moved the trash enclosure. You've moved one of the buildings. It feels as though you've done everything that you need to do, and yet still the community does not seem to be in support of it, based on what I've heard about last night, which is limited. I don't get it. I don't know why. Why not just drop this deal, move on to the next deal that's down the road?
Well, because we bought the property. The client bought the property after his conversations with the planning director. The church became available, and he bought it. And as a matter of fact, I met Anthony and Mr. Garavello soon after they purchased the property. They actually tried to buy the De Benedetto property as well, because staff, we're not blaming staff. I don't want to give you the impression that we're blaming staff. That's not what this is about. We were provided information. We said, look, this is something the city needs. We want to support the infill. And Anthony believes, and I do believe, there's a tremendous need for this project. It's in a great location, just north of downtown. It's just south of the regional commercial center. It's walkable. The VMT indicates how close it is. It's almost a third of the VMT threshold. So I guess, Bob, if we built the project to city standards, and we thought that when we began the project it was a good project, and now you own the property, and we could show you, and we've tried to show the neighbors, it doesn't work at 2 stories. We just have to do the very, very best we can to mitigate the impacts, and
So the one thing that you haven't done is dropped it to 2 stories from the 3 stories, and the neighbors would like that. But even if you were to drop it to 2 stories, do you think you would have unanimous support from the neighbors?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I don't know, unanimous is hard to gauge.
Sure.
It's hard to gauge, but I think 90% of our angst would go away.
Okay.
But it doesn't work, and when I say doesn't work, that was another bone of contention. Well, you just want to make money. Well, I think what they really want to do is not lose money.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at how buildings are constructed, the second floor costs you more than the land does on the first floor.
Mm-hmm.
And consequently, as you go higher and higher, your engineers can tell you this, it gets even more expensive.
Yeah.
But because of the land costs and I think you can appreciate this, Bob, as much as anybody, the pro forma that we performed 3 years ago and we started in 2018, the construction costs have gone up probably a third.
Yeah.
So it makes that third story even more valuable. And at the end of the day, we're still talking only 40 units. It's not like 100 units. It's not 200 units. It's 40 units.
Yeah, but so it sounds like building the third story is going to be disproportionately more expensive than if you were to just go on the first floor, but you still want to go with the 3 stories. And that's your
Understood.
that's your property owner's choice. And I guess what you're saying is, well, and I'm presuming that the people who own this property now knew that this was gonna have to come in front of some governing body.
Correct.
Because it's a GPA and a rezone, so, they may have decided, for whatever reason, to move forward with it, assuming the risk associated with choosing to move forward with it. And it appears to me that, well, let me ask it this way, is the church still in operation there?
No.
Okay.
It's vandalized. We get calls all the time. There's a dilapidated house to the south of the church.
Okay.
And again, this is a project that started some time ago, when, the mandates were there, but the market still indicates a strong demand for this type of a product.
Sure.
Particularly close to the hospital, particularly close to the freeway. We're not apologetic about the demand for the project.
Yeah, I think there's gonna be a lot of people that would like to live there. I think you'll be able to get the kind of rents that you would like to have at that particular, apartment because of its location. The neighbors, for whatever reason, and they'll have an opportunity to speak, but they would prefer to have, it sounds like they would prefer to have the vacant church, there than this particular project as you've proposed it. And, you know, that's something that they can express to us later on if that's what they want. And I guess what you're also saying is that there is no, it doesn't pencil out to keep this as a medium density, GPA general plan designation or a single family, zone for the amount that they paid for the property.
No.
Okay.
And we're not gluttons for punishment. We don't want to go through these things. We hope that we had designed a project that was more compatible, and we began the process. We thought there was demand. We believe there's still demand. We think it's a project that meets your standards, and so that's where we are,
Yeah.
Bob.
Well, I think that from our perspective, the carrot, if there was a carrot for this, was that if it was affordable housing, right? If it was an opportunity to show the state of California, yeah, you know, we certainly need to have a place where we can put some low-income people, that this would be a place that perhaps would make sense. And I don't know, I mean, that doesn't sound like that's something that you guys want to do. It doesn't, I mean, I don't know if the property owners at some point want to sell, and if they do sell, they sell it to somebody who does want to go into more affordable housing. That's going to be a decision for the property owners. But at that point, you know, from the city council's perspective, perhaps we are going to say, well, you know, yeah, we look at our numbers and we know that we don't have enough affordable housing. Maybe it's going to make sense to have this.
Well, and the law changed well into it. We were in this project well over a year. So we had already bought the property, hired an architect, hired an engineer, done calculations, paid some fees. So the government didn't help us.
Okay. Yeah, I gotcha. And you would have gotten some help if you'd gone with an affordable housing.
We would have been by definition, we would have been an affordable housing project.
Yeah.
But we decided to go forward because we still think it's a good project. We still think there's a demand for a project like this.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wanting to comment on this item?
I'm the Mr. Pace that Dirk would refer to a few times. Who's Mr. Pace? Anyway, I was the guy that hired a lawyer and kind of stalled this out last time so that we could meet with Dirk and his clients and see if we could come up with a compromise. And I have to compliment Dirk. He's a very professional guy. The fact that they moved the trash enclosure, I think, was very forthright of him. It was just a smart move. The attention to detail on the landscaping, not lost on me. That stuff takes a while to grow. I think ultimately it could be very beautiful with what they're proposing, moving it away from Phillip where we live, and just creating that buffer. Smart move. But universally, I think everybody here will be willing to stand up and tell you that 3 stories in that neighborhood feels like an overreach. One of the main things we wanted to accomplish in our gathering yesterday was to raise some balloons and do what they do in other communities and put up what they call story sticks that tell a story. How big is this building going to be when it's done? Because of the wind, we couldn't float our balloons yesterday when we had the gathering. So my wife took a picture early this morning when the winds were down. That picture that you're looking at is a balloon on a 35-foot string. And we measured the balloon batch at 4 feet. So you've got 31 feet of string. You can see it's a little bit loose. It's not, fully extended. And that's in front of the only 2-story house in our neighborhood.
How close is it to that, garage there? Is it on the sidewalk? I can't see where it's at.
It is right, it is a foot from the garage.
Thank you.
And so that house is the one that, my elderly neighbor John lives in, who was really kind of upset about the trash enclosure, which is kind of what brought me to this point. So I was really happy about the trash enclosure piece, but the height really is monolithic for the neighborhood. You look at the redevelopment in downtown, those neat 4-story buildings, they're great, but they're massive. And maybe they're just 3-story offices. In this neighborhood, this is going to look really big. I think enough has been said about traffic. The numbers baffle me and befuddle me, especially in a world of Amazon and 3 trips a day and deliveries and stuff. So I won't even debate traffic, but to say there's no traffic impact is nonsensical to me. But again, I really appreciate what they've done so far, but I think it's time to, there's a precedent that could be set here. General plan amendments are not something that people like you normally take lightly, and so this is going to happen in other pockets. I am pro-growth. I think that, I'm one of the few people that would even be okay seeing an affordable project here. I know how that works, and a high-quality affordable project is a good thing. I'm in the banking business. I finance developers that build low-income tax credit apartments all the time. I'm not a NIMBY guy, okay? I think that probably says it all. So anyway, I'll let some of my neighbors speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dirk, the apartments, the gentleman's coming up, the apartments at Temperance and Ashland are 2-story?
Hi, my name's Jim Fantasky, and I own a rental right across from where they're going to move the driveway on Barron south. So now, when my renters are sitting on the front porch, they'll be looking at that driveway. And I didn't realize that's exactly where the new garbage can was going, but I bet you could probably see it from my porch now. But again, none of us would complain, I don't think, if it was 2-story or if we put in a cottage program. It's a great program, right? Some condominium, something, but this thing is huge. I was looking, the ceiling, one of the people brought, the ceiling's about 24, 25 feet, right? Add another 10 feet on top of that. You want that next door to your house, in your neighborhood? None of us do. And just the fact that we're gonna take and increase the density by 6 times on a 1.6 acre lot, that's huge. Nobody wants to have to deal with that, but I'm all for developing it. The guy's got the little golf course over there. It's been great, but there's weeds in there. The church is dilapidated. I'm all for developing it, but this just isn't the right project. And every person that's been up here with the police and everyone else, the Clovis way of life. Clovis way of life, okay? Ms. Ashbeck talked about don't want to go that road. Let's get a citizen group together and make this stuff happen for the police. We have a citizen group together here. We're all for putting something in there. Fix it. Yep, we're all for doing that. But this just is not the right one. Take it to 2 feet or 2 stories. I don't think we'd have any problems at all, just as Jeff said. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Stacy Brinkley, and I own a multi-family unit not very far from here. And my biggest comment with it is the parking. He says these are going to be $2,400 a unit. They're going to be 2-bedroom. You've got the law college. You've got the pharmaceutical college. Are they going to deny 4 girls wanting to rent an apartment? 4 guys? If you do, you've now got 4 cars per unit. Not to mention, you have people that stay. They move in when their child is 10. Now their child is 16. You've got mom, dad, and a teenager, 3 cars. So parking will be a huge issue. Thank you.
excuse me, just like, I appreciate the efforts these guys have made, but my issue is the same as everybody else's. It's too big. It's too big. It's too big for that area. The height is too big, too many units, two-story, I'd feel a lot more comfortable. I'm also concerned about our property values. We already had one neighbor next to Sarah that sold their house after 2 months as soon as they found out this is being proposed. They moved, just a couple of weeks ago, actually. So I'm concerned about our property values because of this unit and the size, too high.
Hi, my name's Karen Bloom Payton. I live on Sierra. I'm really nervous. I don't like to stand up in front of people. I happen to be a real estate appraiser by trade. I've been doing it 36 years, and I can tell you, regardless what anybody says, that the impact of a huge 3-story building upon a single-family neighborhood will negatively impact the value. I have to address it. I have to analyze it on every report I do. And you can't tell me that there isn't a negative effect based on that. And also, just for perspective, my husband and I drove by the Comfort Inn tonight on our way to get dinner before we came here. That's a 3-story building. Go look at that on Clovis Avenue. It's huge. It's not 4, it's 3. Go count them. It's a 3-story building. It's huge. It only has 3 window things, so maybe you're right, but it only has 3 sets of windows, so I counted those as stories when I went by. So these guys did a lot of work. I get that. I applaud that. I don't blame this guy for developing. I'm in the business, so to speak, but I would never put a 3-story structure next to single-family homes. Would you want to live there? I wouldn't. Thank you.
My name is Doug Payton, and I want to appreciate you guys for the questions that you guys are asking, okay? Because they're just like pretty much spot on, you know, about the traffic, things like that. One of the things that the neighbor was saying is when I look at how high this is not something, and by the way, I'm over on Sarah. This is not something that I would want to see looking out of my door, okay? That's number one. And number two, they mentioned about some plants on the north side of the complex. I'm not sure how wide of an area they have between the fence and the building, but if you're growing some tall trees, you don't have that much area to grow trees at. It's great to say that, but reality just doesn't fit in, okay? You mentioned traffic. There's some other thoughts that I had. I forgot what they were. So the other night, you know, we did some research. I'm Mr. Higeman. Couldn't find very much out about him. You know, so I figured, well, hey, is there any court cases or anything else like that? And one of the things that I did find is like every 5 years, he's being sued in court, okay? And unless there's a different name. So, and there's a lawsuit just got done not too long ago with Fresno, okay? And this is the kind of contention that happened yesterday. I was there, and there wasn't any supporters for the 3-story building. Everybody was saying, hey, 2 stories, you know, we can probably make it happen. But my concern is the people that you deal with, you know. It's like, this is Clovis, a way of life. We hear all those things, we support it. But it makes you wonder, who are you shaking hands with, you know? So there's breach of contracts in there, other things, and those things that I'd be concerned of if I'm dealing with somebody, you know, on that level, okay?
Council members, Mayor, thank you for meeting with us. And like my neighbor said, you did have spot-on questions that we had when we were there. And Mr. Dirk was kind enough yesterday to go over things, and things started off very well. And what you just saw was what we had to deal with. When we were asking him questions about what he was going to do with the neighborhood, and I think I opened a can of peas when I said, what's wrong with the two-story? That might be more compatible to our neighborhood. And that's when he lost it. He became somebody different, and Mr. Dirk tried to calm him down. He got personal. He called one of my neighbors a dim, which is a slang for dimwit, when she had very good questions, and all we were doing was asking questions. But when he didn't know how to answer us, he became defensive. He was even dropping the F-bomb at us. I tried to ask him to calm down. We just want to talk, but that didn't happen. This is calm and mild compared to how he behaved yesterday. And so it just made it very uncomfortable, and that's what ended the meeting. But I do want to thank him for trying to do his best to calm him down. We as homeowners, we love our neighborhood. We're part of Old Town, which is a Clovis way of life. I mean, I've been here over 30 years. My house will face directly that property. And I am concerned about the traffic. Yes, he said they're going to be contained, but like we said, it was brought up, when they have more people moving in, that's more cars. And they have guests, that's more cars. As it is now, people do park in front of our houses, but for a short time. But when you have them there overnight, we have Monday garbage pickup and Tuesday street sweeping. We all pay for that. I don't want somebody's car in front of my house and then the street sweepers pass me by. That's a service I pay for. So, like everybody else, we're very concerned about the height of that complex and the traffic it's going to be in. That's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Robin DeFalco. I live at 227 Barron. I'm the one that submitted a letter, so I won't go over all of that again, but I think we're all in agreement that a two-story would be better suited. Preferably, we would all probably love a cottage unit community there. I think that, a three-story would be drastically out of place. I think that the council and planning's done a great job in Old Town, building the Realty Concept Building, House of Juju, Foundry, that suits that area. Even the Hot Kitch Center, the Senior Center, 3 stories, but on the ends, it's 2 stories, so it has a better aesthetic feel. I think that just the 3-story is just out of place for Old Town. Thank you.
Anyone else here at the chamber? Do we have anyone on the web?
No.
Okay, so we'll bring it back to the council.
Well, if I may go.
Sure.
Thank you. My view of general plan amendments is gotten a little bit looser over the years because of the need that we have had for higher density as a result of the need for just more homes being built in the state of California, and certainly here in the city of Clovis. Infill development is a good thing in that we can actually utilize the capacity that we've built out that is kind of waiting for residences to move in there. But my position has been that a general plan is to a large degree an agreement with the community, and if it's going to be changed, then the community needs to be on board. Here, I think efforts were made to try to accommodate the community, but for whatever reason, the community that surrounds this area chose that it wasn't enough. And it sounds like it wasn't enough because instead of going with 2 stories, the developer was insistent upon the 3 stories. And so for that reason, I think that the council should, deny the request for the general plan amendment, as well as the rezone. I will say that his behavior in the chambers here today also didn't do him any favors, Dirk. So I appreciate you having to work with some of the difficult personalities you have to work with in your line of business, but I think that, I can't remember the gentleman who made the points, earlier about, you know, you want to know the people that you're dealing with. And if they're going to be behaving like that, I don't want to be dealing with them. And I don't think the city of Clovis should be wanting to deal with them either. So, I'm going to be a no vote. If this, I'm going to say, I'm going to be a vote in favor of denying, if that's what the motion is.
Okay, then?
Just a couple of comments. I guess planning is not easy business, Dirk, as you know. A couple of comments. I feel very protective of this neighborhood, more than I do, not, that's terrible, more than I do in many others. Don't tell anybody I said that, I'm just kidding.
Tell everybody in the neighborhood.
Okay, I'm very protective. Obviously, I don't live in your neighborhood, but I feel like it's really this sort of special little enclave that it's got the history of Clovis, and I know Dirk. I'm sure you counseled. I don't even know who that was. I assume that's Mr. Hageman. So I'm sure you counseled him on that. So I do think we have an obligation to our older neighborhoods in particular, and those with historical value, to protect them in some way. And I think you made an investment in that neighborhood to live in that sort of space. So I think that's legitimate. My view, my really always answer is there's got to be a compromise. It's zoned for 11 and you want 40, but there's something in the middle. And I feel like the neighbors are saying, hey, something in the middle would have been good. And I don't do math, as we've all established here, but I can't help but think that you couldn't have found a compromise. My sense of the layout of this is it's pretty, not that creative. I mean, it's two buildings that make an L, and that's about it. Like, is there something else you could have done to disperse the tall buildings, or have the, I think, Robin, you talked to, yeah, the two-story on the ends. I mean, I think there's a little bit of more creativity that could have happened on the property. And again, I'm not a planner either, and I don't want to do that here, but I just feel like that we probably could have come up with some solution that was a little bit better. And I do feel like 3 stories is really way too tall for this particular neighborhood. And my final comment is I have a lot of pet peeves after all these years, but one of them, after fences, is the tall tree promise, because trees start out like this. And we say that in shopping centers, we say that in neighborhoods, and you know, I mean, you kind of laugh about that, but we make these promises like, oh, these tall trees are going to be great. None of us will be around long enough to see those trees very tall. So I think that's not a fair promise to the neighbors, that the tall trees would be of some benefit, because they're not going to see the benefit of those trees for a decade at least. So that, to me, that's right behind fences for me, but I think that's not quite a fair representation. So I also don't support the change. I think development on this property is sorely needed. I think the neighbors say it's sorely needed. It's a great piece of property. The church looks horrible. Clean it up. It's right next to Old Town. I'd like to live in Old Town someday. I mean, I think it's really a great piece of property. I just am not sure this doesn't seem like the right fit for the property.
Sure.
At this point, I feel like I'm piling on to bring up some of the other issues, and I appreciate what I'm hearing from the neighbors isn't an NIMBY thing, not in my backyard. This piece of land needs to be developed, because otherwise it's going to be an eyesore. The worst case scenario for me here is either a fire, or now we're having to scoot out transients who are digging in like ticks. We don't want that either. So I'm hoping that when this project comes back, that if whoever develops it meets you halfway, that you welcome them with open arms and we get this done. But I can't support this project as stated. Thank you.
Well, I can already count. So no. You can do the math. Yeah. No, I just look back to the direction that we give, and I look back at that meeting, and all I thought was traffic was our issue. And so I look back at it and I go, okay, yeah, come back, study pedestrian flow and traffic. It gets done, we make them go pay for it, they do it, and then now we go, oh wait, more. So, and that's, to me, that's bad governance when we keep doing that. So that's why I just go, you know, they abide by everything, they use the actual general plan amendment to come, and so that's why I kind of go, okay, if it was something else, if it was height, then let's just put that out up front, you know? Height was one. Go back and change all the heights of that way. Because this evening was the first time where I really heard you were okay, residents, with 40 units, as long as it's two-story. But I thought I didn't hear that last time, and so that's why I'm sort of just confused. And so, based upon what we decided last time, I felt like the applicant gave a lot, completed the traffic study per the direction of staff, worked with staff to give as much as they can. So that's why I'm inclined to follow our last direction and decide accordingly.
I'm too, a lot like Long. I have a special affinity to the Old Town. I think, because I do believe it's the spirit of our town. And I do consider your neighborhood tremendously when making decisions up here. Because, believe it or not, I used to walk across there when I used to walk from my house all the way to Weldon sometimes when I was a little kid. And, but that whole section of town has been an eyesore for most of my life. That's a long time. I've been alive 63 years, and for 63 years, that place, especially around Clovis Avenue and 3rd, and all the way to Sierra along Clovis Avenue, and Clovis has become Old Town Clovis has become a gem, and people want to be there. And what this development promised was that more people could be there. There were going to be intellectual professionals or future that would pay high rent. And I do believe in the traffic study, because people that are studying to be that or are that, they don't generate a lot of traffic, because they ride bicycles, they do other things to get from point A to point B. And so I too am surprised that today the issue is high rises, which is only one more, a three-story building, when initially it was about traffic. And I'm satisfied that the traffic study revealed what it should have revealed. I was ready to vote yes on this project the first time it came here. I don't know if you guys knew that, but I was. I'm not like Councilmember Whalen about general plan amendments. I often remind them, if we can amend the Constitution, we can amend anything. And it's the American way. I believe in property rights. I'm a very conservative person. I think owners of property deserve to do what they want to do on their property if they do it right. If they do it right. And so that exhibition we saw here today, and I guess there was an exhibition yesterday, that's not right. I'm also very conservative that way. So I apologize for that experience you had yesterday and today, because that's not right. So, but I think Drew said best, that something has to go in there, and I too can count. And but I think we need something that is for that demographic in Old Town, and I thought this project could have done that. And I think we're going to miss an opportunity, but and I think we're going to be sorry that this project isn't going to be there. Our professionals are recommending we approve this, and they're saying that for a reason. They're not saying that because they think this is some kind of frivolous application. They're telling us, council, you hire us as professionals after evaluating what these people have done. It's worth the rest to do. So I'm willing to entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that I think this is right, we deny the environmental finding of a mitigated negative deck for the general plan amendment, GPA 2018-003 and rezone 2018-009.
Actually, I'm a little nervous about that.
Yeah, I don't know, is that what I want to do?
No, because if we do that, then I'm concerned about any future project that might come in.
I knew I told you I was worried about that. All right, delete that, scratch. I'll make a motion to approve the environmental finding of a mitigated negative effect for the two projects.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So that motion carries 5-0.
And I'll make a motion to deny the request to amend the GPA to redesignate from the medium-density residential to the very high-density residential for future development.
And I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay. So there's a 3-2 vote on that motion. The motion carries.
And I'll also make a motion to deny the rezone from R1 single-family residential to the R4.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those against, nay. Nay. So the motion carries with 3 ayes and 2 nays. And we'll go on with our city manager's comments. Number 13, COVID update. COVID-19 update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Just wanted to go through the weekly update once again. These are the graphs showing the reported confirmed cases in Fresno County and the state on a per capita basis. And the graph on the right is the reported deaths on state and county basis, with the dark black line representing county per capita rate and the gray line representing the state. As you can see, the cases are bouncing up and down, but trending downward. The confirmed deaths, not so much yet. They are bouncing around. Don't know yet if we have a confirmed downward slope to that last line. The state rate is declining. The county line we would expect to run, 2 to 3 weeks behind the new cases. So we're watching that. I do want to point out that we did receive a public comment on this item requesting some Clovis specific information. That is, next week I'll try to get as much as I can. That is not easily come by. The state and the county don't report it necessarily by jurisdiction, it's by zip code. And much of especially the 93619 zip code is outside our city limits, but it's included as part of the Clovis number. Same thing with 93611. I'll try to get the information, but it's not necessarily comparing apples to apples when you do that. This is the Fresno County COVID hospitalizations, the blue line representing the confirmed and suspected hospitalizations, the red line representing the ICU. As you can see, there is a strong upward trend recently in the hospitalizations, and the ICU is trending slightly upward but holding fairly steady. Again, this is statewide basis on vaccinated versus unvaccinated new cases. Basically shows that you're 6.8 times more likely to get COVID if you are unvaccinated. This is the vaccinated versus unvaccinated deaths, showing that you're 18.2 times more likely to die from COVID than vaccinated individuals. And on the left is the status. Fresno County, 55% of the eligible individuals are vaccinated, fully vaccinated. California, that number 74%, and nationwide at 68%. So we continue to lag behind the rest of the country and the rest of the state when it comes to vaccination. That concludes my report. I'm open for any questions.
Questions for Luke? Okay. No further comments on any city manager comments?
No.
Okay. So council member comments. Bong?
Just wanted to report out the ACA committee met again last Wednesday, and so we got more details, not details, but more comments just from the members. We will not meet again until the 17th, and then we'll make a recommendation with regards to local control to the sort of the policy committee of the league. So we'll see how that goes. And then, if we are interested, the proponents are willing to provide a report to us, so that way we can fully understand what it entails. It answers questions with regards, does it circumvent CEQA? And it doesn't do any of that, because it only affects land use and zoning. And so it's very clear. There's they have a legal representation that answers all those questions that might be confusing, of local jurisdictions running amok and just planning and zoning like crazy, and so it's not going to do any of that. So.
Okay. Bob? Council comments?
So let's see, Orville is now a, free city, what are they? They're a constitutionalist city. So that's one option. That when we talked the other day, Scott, you may want to throw that in, the options to consider as to what we say when we're done with U State of California, and what does that look like? So we can join the state of Orville.
Or form our own state.
Stop talking.
Or
Formerly known as Orville.
Drew?
I was part of a call-in conversation to the redistricting commission last week. I identified myself as a council member. If you have not taken the opportunity to look at how the proposed redistricting, especially for our congressional seat, goes, Clovis is cut out of Fresno County, and we are connected to Bakersfield in a very circuitous fashion, and I believe, if I'm looking at the map correctly, obviously Bakersfield's an incorporated city. We're an incorporated city. We would be the only two incorporated cities in that congressional district. It splits the city of Fresno into 3 congressional districts. It's just a very poorly managed and thought through district. It would skip over Visalia? If you think about, Clovis gets cut out of Fresno, we would be the only incorporated city in Fresno County that is excluded. And we would go down basically through the mountains and come back into Kern County and then take in parts of Bakersfield. It makes no sense at all. And if you were a glasses half empty person, you would think that this was done for a specific political purpose. Because it just doesn't, I don't think it serves the citizens of Clovis well. It certainly doesn't. It puts us in a position where Bakersfield is going to have more influence, certainly, than we would. Plus, it puts us in competition with industries we have nothing to do with, like the petroleum industry, large ag industries. It really pulls in, it goes all the way out to like Ridgecrest and Boron, and it makes no sense at all. I brought those, I was a little more delicate about it, obviously, in that and there was a lot of people in Bakersfield who were speaking out against this also, because they felt it diluted their political power and coupled them with a city that they have very little in common with, other than we both have great people who live within our boundaries. I'm hoping that when they finish this, it'll be better. But if we get stuck with this, we're stuck with this for 10 years. And I have nothing against Kevin McCarthy. He seems like a nice, he would be our congressperson. Yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons with every situation, but this is nonsense. So that's, I threw I threw my name into the ring as a council member saying that I was opposed to this because of what it did to our city. That's all I have.
Then,
I'm still trying to figure out, I might be a half-empty person, I still can't think of the reason why it makes sense.
You should look at the map. You'll be,
Yeah,
it's entertaining.
I actually
Well, I'm still studying that congressional map because it does go from Clovis near Bakersfield and actually surrounds Bakersfield, and it looks kind of weird. But so you guys need to go to WeDrawTheLinesCalifornia.org and look at the visualizations. Basically, they have incorporated the congressional districts of Devin Nunes and McCarthy. And so it looks like they're going to cause a internal fight between those two to run against the same seat. And so what I don't understand is that if the population was lost in the LA area, why are they doing this to the Central Valley? It doesn't make sense that we gained population and they lost population, yet we're going to suffer the consequences of their loss of population. So they should actually shrink our sizes, not expand them like the way they're proposing. So we need to study that issue and quickly send them a letter in opposition. But it can't be political. It has to make sense. We should be it should be apples to apples. Why are they putting us with a different economy? We should be kept with people that are similar to us, similar communities, and contiguous to us, not way down in Bakersfield where, like Drew said, why are we in the oil fields and stuff, you know?
And deserts.
And deserts. Why, when people closer to us and geography closer to us, economies closer to us would make a lot more sense. So whoever drew up this visualization maps did a horrible job. But
Are you saying we should weigh in on this?
oh, I would say so. I am going to. I'm preparing the letter already, but I could do it as.
If council wants, staff can prepare a letter for mayor's signature as well.
So I'll give you my 2 cents, and so.
I'd be in support of a letter, sir.
Huh?
It's a bit of a moving target. So the maps that you were discussing, they've already changed, right?
Yeah,
So they came out again on, I guess, actually today, because they weren't up yesterday for the congressional. And now we're not into Bakersfield, but we circle around Bakersfield to the south and then come up on the west side of Bakersfield.
Well, that's the map I saw. Even.
As long as we have Oildale, I'm fine.
But it's still, isn't it McCarthy district still?
I don't know where those guys live, so.
No, I think it is.
They don't have to live there.
That's true.
So, anyway, that's all I have. And so we are adjourned. He's doing